gates closed and directing the Unsullied to root out conspirators. There was blood in the streets those weeks, and Melisandre counseled mercy tempered with justice. She offered to read the flames to pinpoint the rebels. But Daenerys refused to rely solely on that, trusting her own investigative measures, aided by Tyrion's cunning mind. The rebellion was eventually contained, though not without cost. Daenerys attended the funeral rites for those who died, some of her closest allies lost in the violence. Standing in the flickering glow of funeral pyres, Daenerys' sorrow was tangible, and Melisandre stood beside her, quietly chanting the rites of the Lord of Light for the fallen, hoping to bring a measure of peace to their passing. Despite such grief, Daenerys' hold on Meereen gradually strengthened. Traders from other cities began to tentatively accept her rule, some even seeking her out for the commerce that now flowed through the reopened ports. Her dragons grew larger, more fearsome, patrolling the skies above the city, a living warning to any who might attempt a coup. But with each passing day, Melisandre felt the pull of a new conflict, far away across the sea. The long night drew closer, she was sure. She prayed Daenerys would not be too late. The day came when a ship arrived from Westeros bearing troubling rumors. A messenger from the north reported sightings of undead creatures beyond the wall, armies of whites and White Walkers advancing. The wildlings had crossed south of the wall, led by a man named Jon Snow. There were tales that the Night's Watch was hard-pressed to contain the threat. Tales of ancient horrors come again. Daenerys listened to the messenger with grim intensity. Tyrion and Ser Barristan exchanged glances, uncertain how much credence to give such wild stories. Yet Daenerys' eyes slid to Melisandre, who stood quietly to one side, her red robes shifting in the breeze. Melisandre could see in the Queen's expression the dawning realization. Maybe the Red Priestess's warnings were not merely fanatic ravings. "I have heard your words, messenger," Daenerys said gravely. "Return and tell your people I will consider what can be done. But this threat must be real if I am to move my forces so far." The messenger bowed. "Yes, your grace. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch begs your help. He says even kings in the south are slow to believe." Daenerys' gaze hardened. Then the south must be made to believe. After the messenger departed, she withdrew to a private council. Melisandre attended alongside Tyrion, Barristan, Missandei, and Grey Worm. Daario was away with a detachment of troops securing a rebellious outpost. Daenerys asked for counsel. Tyrion stroked his chin thoughtfully. "If these White Walkers truly exist, then the entire realm is in danger. But if you march north, you leave Meereen vulnerable. Not to mention you have no support from the lords in Westeros. They see you as a foreign invader. Unless you can sway them." Barristan's white hair caught the light as he inclined his head. "Your grace, the realm remembers your father as the Mad King. The lords may not welcome a Targaryen queen, but there are those still loyal to the memory of your house. You might find allies if you can demonstrate you are not your father." Missandei added quietly, "What is clear is that the city cannot yet govern itself without your guiding hand. The freedmen do not trust a council alone. They trust you." Daenerys drummed her fingers on the table. "So I must be in two places at once. Or I must find a way to unify them. If the threat is real, ignoring it would be reckless. If I do go, I could lose everything I have built here." Her gaze flicked to Melisandre. "This war you've spoken of, it is upon us sooner than we expected. What do you advise?" Melisandre's throat felt tight. She had long feared this moment, the turning point. She answered carefully, "Your grace, the threat in the north is dire. If these White Walkers move unchecked, they will slaughter the living and raise them to fight again. You would not only save the realm by facing them, you would prove to all in Westeros that you are a true protector worthy of the Iron Throne. But that does not solve the matter of who rules Meereen in my absence," Daenerys said. Tyrion tapped the table. "I propose we formalize a new administrative council with advisors you trust to uphold your ideals. Grey Worm can maintain the Unsullied presence. You can leave a dragon behind for additional security, Viserion or Regal, perhaps. Let them see your power remains even if you're absent. Meanwhile, you could take your largest dragon to Westeros along with a portion of your forces enough to demonstrate your might." Barristan nodded. "It would be wise to also secure alliances with major houses once you land in Westeros. House Tyrell, House Martell, possibly the North itself, if you help them repel this threat." Grey Worm spoke in his quiet, measured tone. The freedmen will be afraid if you go, but they will endure if they know you have not abandoned them. If we remain strong here, the sons of the Harpy will not dare attempt a resurgence. Daenerys looked at each of them, then turned to Melisandre. You have told me of a great war. The time has come, it seems, to fight it. But I will not go alone. I need at least part of my army and my dragons. Melisandre inclined her head. And I will stand beside you, your grace, if you will have me. A faint ghost of a smile curved Daenerys' lips. Yes, Red Priestess, I will have you. We sail soon. In the ensuing weeks, the city of Meereen bustled with preparations for Daenerys' departure. Most of the Dothraki she had gathered to her cause would remain, patrolling the surrounding plains and ensuring no city would dare rise against Meereen while the Dragon Queen was gone. Grey Worm would lead the Unsullied Guard within the city's walls. Tyrion, to Melisandre's mild surprise, opted to accompany Daenerys to Westeros, citing that his knowledge of the Seven Kingdoms might be an asset. Besides, Tyrion quipped, if we leave the city under the watchful eye of strong leadership here, I'd only get underfoot if I stayed. Finally, the day arrived. A grand flotilla of ships awaited Daenerys at Meereen's harbor. She boarded with her retinue, men, women, and dragons, and set sail across the waves. The largest dragon, Drogon, soared overhead, casting a colossal shadow on the fleet. Rhaegal and Viserion followed, though they would eventually return with a portion of the army once Daenerys determined how many dragons she truly needed to deter any rebellion back in Meereen. It was a delicate balance. As the vessel rolled beneath her feet, Melisandre stood at the prow beside Daenerys, who gazed over the roiling sea. The queen's silver hair whipped in the wind, and her violet eyes gleamed with anticipation and something else, perhaps uncertainty. Melisandre murmured, the time has come to claim what is yours. Daenerys exhaled. We shall see if Westeros is ready for my claim. And if the darkness is real, then we shall see if I can help turn it back. Melisandre felt a flicker of warmth at those words. This was a queen who would not shy away from a threat to all living. She watched as the horizon stretched out before them, a wide and wild path leading to the Seven Kingdoms, to war, to prophecy, and to whatever future Lawler had in store. The crossing took weeks, punctuated by storms that tested the largest ships and the resilience of the men aboard them. Daenerys spent many hours on deck, gazing at the clouds, occasionally taking flight on Drogon to scout ahead, sending the beast swooping low over the waves. The men cheered whenever the dragon soared overhead. Some claimed it was an omen of victory, others prayed to their own gods for safe passage. Melisandre's nights were spent in quiet devotion below decks, lighting candles and gazing into their flickering flames, searching for visions. Sometimes she saw the glimmer of white, a frosty wind. At other times she saw fleeting images of Daenerys walking through an endless snowfield with Drogon roaring behind her. Always, the illusions dissipated too soon, leaving a sense of urgency in her heart. At last, they spotted land. Westeros, the heartland that Daenerys Targaryen had been exiled from so long ago. She chose to land first on Dragonstone, the ancestral seat of House Targaryen, a fortress perched on a craggy island carved in the shape of dragons. Here, Daenerys' ancestors had once planned the conquest of the Seven Kingdoms, so it was fitting that Daenerys should land there first to make it her base of operations. Melisandre recognized the fortress from her old days serving Stannis. Memories of a bleak courtyard, its walls hammered by storms, stirred in her mind. But now she arrived under a new banner. Daenerys' proud dragon standard fluttering in the salt-tinged wind. She silently prayed that this time her presence would not be tainted by past mistakes. Landing parties secured the beach while Daenerys circled overhead on Drogon, ensuring no hidden threats awaited them. It turned out that Stannis had abandoned Dragonstone earlier, marching his army north. The castle was empty of defenders. Daenerys led her retinue up the winding path to the ancient gates, which creaked open without resistance. Inside, they found dust and echoes of old battles. Tattered Baratheon banners still clung to walls. Daenerys ordered them removed. Melisandre watched as the Targaryen banner was hoisted high once more, snapping in the wind. She saw Daenerys stand in the great hall where once Stannis had brooded by a painted table depicting the Seven Kingdoms. The queen brushed her fingers over the carved coasts and mountains, studying them. Tyrion, stepping beside her, said quietly, "Here, your ancestors planned their conquest. Now you stand where Aegon the Conqueror once stood. Do you mean to follow in his footsteps?" Daenerys lifted her hand from the table. "I mean to do more than conquer. I mean to save them from what comes. But yes, I will do what I must to secure the realm." Melisandre approached, remembering the nights she had prayed here for the Lord of Light to guide Stannis. How twisted the illusions had seemed in hindsight. I can show you the chamber I once used, your grace, though it may be in disrepair. Daenerys nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Yes, and perhaps you can show me more of this castle's secrets. There must be old records, weapons, histories. All may prove useful. They explored the depths of Dragonstone. The echoes of Melisandre's past weighed on her, a memory of conjuring shadows in the gloom. She had once used black magic in service to Stannis, believing it to be righteous. She still felt uneasy about those acts, but she pushed the regret away. This was a new beginning, and Daenerys was a different sovereign. Before long, Daenerys sent envoys to the mainland, inviting the lords of Westeros to come treat with her. Some responded with intrigue or caution, others with outright hostility. Yet the biggest challenge for Daenerys was not these southern lords, but the war in the north. Word came that the threat was growing. White Walkers had crossed the frozen wastes, and rumors claimed they had raided villages and strongholds, adding to their undead ranks. Jon Snow, the king in the north, crowned after certain events involving the Stark family, was said to be fortifying the wall. Daenerys decided she must meet this northern king. If he is truly fighting the dead, then we share a common foe, she declared. I will not let an ancient evil sweep over the land when we could stand together against it. Preparations were made. A portion of Daenerys' host would remain at Dragonstone, secure the castle, and wait for further instruction. The queen herself would fly north on Drogon, accompanied by a small escort traveling by land, Tyrion, Ser Barristan, a retinue of loyal guards, and Melisandre. The latter felt a thrumming of excitement as she joined the expedition, for she would finally see for herself the imminent darkness. She prayed to the Lord of Light that Daenerys would unite with the forces in the north, forging an alliance strong enough to face the coming storm. They landed at White Harbor after a long journey, the freezing wind a stark contrast to the warm climate of Essos. Daenerys quickly realized how different these northerners were from the people of Meereen or the lords of the south. They were grim, proud, and suspicious of outsiders. But the presence of Drogon, who circled overhead, was impossible to ignore. His roars echoed across the harbor, and the people watched in awe and fear. Daenerys' approach was hardly subtle, but perhaps subtlety was not what the moment required. From White Harbor, they traveled inland. Daenerys rode amid her retinue, while Drogon soared overhead or sometimes landed to trot beside them in great bounding strides, steam curling from his nostrils in the frigid air. Melisandre pulled her cloak tight against the biting cold. She was more used to heat, but she reminded herself that this was the land threatened by the Great Other. In these icy expanses, the darkness roamed. She kept her senses open, half expecting to see an army of whites appear on the horizon at any moment. They came at last to Winterfell, an ancient fortress of House Stark. Snow blanketed the land, swirling in the wind. Daenerys dismounted as the castle gates opened, revealing the watchers on the battlements. Jon Snow emerged at the head of a group wearing black furs. He was of middling height, dark hair, and stern, brooding features. At his side stood several northern lords, along with a tall woman in gleaming mail who introduced herself as Brienne of Tarth, and a red-haired lady who watched Daenerys with a reserved politeness, Lady Sansa Stark. The tension was palpable. The north had suffered betrayal and war. Now they faced a Targaryen queen arriving with a dragon at their gates. And yet, if the threat of the White Walkers was as dire as the rumors claimed, they had reason to welcome any ally. Jon Snow spoke first, voice measured. Your Grace, I am Jon Snow, king in the north. I've heard tales of your arrival and your dragons. I see at least one of them behind you. We have urgent matters to discuss if half of what I've heard is true. Daenerys inclined her head, adopting a gracious tone. King Jon, I have come because I believe you and I wish to help. We stand on the brink of a threat that could destroy us all. Melisandre watched the interplay. She could see the flicker of doubt in Jon Snow's eyes, the wariness in Sansa's stance, the curiosity in Brienne's. These people had endured too many false promises from would-be kings and queens. But Daenerys was no mere claimant to a throne. She was the mother of dragons, breaker of chains, and if the dire threat was real, she was their best hope. She held out an olive branch, continuing, I offer my forces and my dragons to fight the White Walkers. In return, I ask that the North recognize me as the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. But let us put aside titles for a moment. Our survival matters more than crowns, does it not? Jon exhaled a cloud of frost. It does. I care for the living. If you and your armies can help, I would gladly have you. We can speak of who sits on the Iron Throne after we ensure there are people left to sit under it. There was a murmur among the northern lords, some bristling at the idea of bending the knee. But Jon held up a hand. This is a time for unity. The White Walkers are real, and if we do not stand together, we will fall apart. Daenerys glanced at Melisandre for a moment. The Red Priestess gave a subtle nod, acknowledging that this was indeed the war they had prepared for. Daenerys said calmly, "Then let us unite. Where shall we begin?" Jon gestured into the courtyard. "Come inside, your grace. We can plan by the warmth of a fire." And so Daenerys Targaryen set foot in Winterfell's great hall, greeted by a swirl of activity as servants rushed to accommodate the influx of guests. Tyrion marveled at the solemn tapestries. Ser Barristan greeted a few men he recognized from earlier campaigns. Meanwhile, Melisandre lingered near the fires burning in the hearth, letting the heat wash over her. She felt a sense of fate in the air, as though each step Daenerys took was guided by the light of Lawlor. This was where the future of the realm would be decided, in the cold north, among the snows, preparing for the onslaught of the dead. They assembled around a massive wooden table laid out with maps of the north. Jon traced a line with his gloved finger, outlining the wall and the known points of breach. Daenerys listened intently, her expression growing darker with each revelation about how the White Walkers raised the dead, how they commanded a relentless legion that did not feel hunger or fear. The northern lords, though still cautious, began to see that Daenerys brought genuine power, armies of unsullied Dothraki, and 3 living dragons. Even the stiff-necked Lord Glover, who had hesitated to trust outsiders, grudgingly acknowledged that no single army of the north could stand alone against such a foe. Tyrion weighed in with strategic suggestions. Ser Davos Seaworth, who had arrived some time before in the north, joined as well, casting sidelong glances at Melisandre, for he recalled her from Dragonstone. The tension was clear, an unspoken history between them. But Davos's main concern was survival, and he offered his honest counsel, explaining supply routes and the hardships of a northern winter. Sansa Stark, with quiet dignity, insisted that the North's resources must be rationed carefully to withstand both the winter and the arrival of so many new fighters. Plans were drawn, alliances formed. The Targaryen banner was raised alongside the direwolf of House Stark, a powerful symbol of unity. As the days turned to weeks, word spread that the Dragon Queen had come to fight the White Walkers. Some of the southern lords began sending envoys north. A few came in person, wary but curious. Others sent polite refusals, believing the threat exaggerated. Daenerys bristled at the arrogance of those who sat in King's Landing, ignoring the peril. Jon sought to reason with them, sending ravens that implored unity. But the realm remained fractured, Cersei Lannister on the Iron Throne, forging her own schemes. Even so, time was running short. The winter snows deepened and reports of sightings of the dead grew more frequent. Eventually, Daenerys led a scouting party beyond the wall, determined to see the threat firsthand. Jon went with her, along with a group of her most trusted warriors. Melisandre stayed behind at Winterfell, her role to keep the fires lit and watch for signs in the flames. She spent long nights chanting in the Godwood, where the old weirwood tree stood silent under its mantle of snow. She prayed Lawlor would watch over the queen. The flames showed her glimpses, dragons roaring against a white sky, the flash of ice and steel, Daenerys bathed in harsh white light, her face set with fierce determination. A swirl of chaotic images that left Melisandre breathless. Something momentous was happening beyond the wall. She could only hope Daenerys would return safely. After many tense days, the scouting party rode back, haggard, bearing wounds, but alive. They brought with them a captured wight, bound in chains, a horrific thing of rotted flesh and gnashing teeth. Daenerys was pale with cold, her hair rimed with frost, but her eyes blazed. She had seen the army of the dead. She had lost men to their unrelenting horde. Her dragons had fought in the sky above a frozen lake. One of them, Viserion, had been slain, pierced by an ice spear from the Night King himself, and had fallen beneath the ice. Melisandre's heart clenched when she heard that dreadful news. The death of a dragon was a blow against the living flame. Daenerys' voice was hoarse as she recounted what had happened. He, the Night King, he took Viserion. He has him now. An undead dragon in his thrall. That revelation sent shockwaves through Winterfell. An undead dragon meant the Night King had a terrifying new weapon. Melisandre knelt by the hearth, bowing her head, feeling sorrow for the lost dragon. She whispered prayers for Rhaegal and Drogon that they might remain strong and uncorrupted by the darkness. In quiet, she told Daenerys, "We must not let despair consume us. We must stand even stronger. The great other thrives on hopelessness." Daenerys nodded grimly. "Yes, that is what I saw beyond the wall. A despair so deep it could swallow the world. But I will not let it. I swear to you, Melisandre, and to every living soul, I will fight until my last breath to protect them." Soon, a decision was made to gather all possible forces at Winterfell to make a stand. If the White Walkers came in overwhelming numbers, the North would be their first line of defense. Jon Snow reasoned that if they could destroy the Night King, the rest of the Whites might fall. The living prepared trenches, fortified the walls, stockpiled dragon glass weapons, obsidian retrieved from the stores on Dragonstone, which rumor said could kill White Walkers. Daenerys oversaw the forging of these weapons, ensuring both her Dothraki and the Unsullied had them. She spent hours with her remaining dragons, Drogon and Rhaegal, letting them grow accustomed to the frigid air. Tyrion coordinated the defenses with the Northern Lords, while Sansa organized the shelter and feeding of civilians. Everyone had a role. Melisandre advised them to keep the fires burning at all times. Light was their ally against the dark. At last, the dreaded day arrived. A horn's clarion call echoed across the frosty plains outside Winterfell. The dead were here. Melisandre stood on the battlements beside Daenerys, peering into the gloom of a winter twilight. The vast shapes of Whites, once men, giants, and beasts, moved across the plain in a silent wave. A bitter wind whirled snow in ghostly spirals, making it impossible to see the full extent of the horde. Among them, great pale figures of White Walkers on undead horses surveyed the fortress. The pounding of a single war drum, if it could be called that, reverberated, or perhaps it was the heartbeat of the many thousands of dead in eerie unison. Daenerys drew a sharp breath. There are more than I imagined. Even after what I saw beyond the wall, this is worse. Melisandre touched the ruby at her throat, feeling it pulse with heat. Remember, Your Grace, you are the flame in the darkness. Take heart. Below, the gates opened for a moment. A small band of archers advanced, lighting arrow after arrow with pitch-soaked torches, letting them fly. The first ranks of the dead were hit, staggering and burning, but still they came. In the sky, a terrible screech filled the air. Melisandre's blood turned to ice as she recognized the sound, an undead dragon, Viserion, soared above, skeletal wings creaking. Blue flame spewed from its maw, colder than ice and yet scorching in a horrifying way that shattered stone where it struck. Daenerys cursed softly under her breath, tears glistening unshed at the sight of her lost child perverted by the Night King. Jon Snow, leading the cavalry in the courtyard, shouted commands. The Dothraki unleashed blood-curdling war cries, many carrying arak blades lined with dragaglass. The Unsullied formed disciplined ranks. Northerners joined in, hearts pounding. Daenerys whirled to Melisandre, face set in fierce resolve. I will take Drogon, try to bring down the Night King before he can do more damage. Melisandre nodded. Go. The Lord of Light guide you. With that, Daenerys rushed to where Drogon waited outside the gates. She climbed onto his scaled back, stroking his neck. The dragon roared, flames bursting from his maw, and with a mighty leap, he took to the skies. Rhaegal followed, riderless but loyal. The two living dragons soared in the gale, confronting their fallen sibling. High above the battlefield, a battle of dragons unfolded in the swirling snow and gloom. On the ground, the dead closed in, unstoppable and relentless. Melisandre stood at the forefront of the walls, chanting an incantation in the old tongue of Asgai. She reached out her hands to the braziers lining the battlements. Flames leaped higher, sparked by the power of her prayer. One by one, the defenders dipped their weapons into the fire, lighting them with the holy flame that might drive back the Whites. She knew her strength was limited. This was no trick of illusions. She was channeling raw power from Lawler. She felt it burn within her, feeding on her very life to keep the fire strong. But she gave it freely, for this was the hour of greatest need. The armies clashed in a roar of battle cries and hissing undead. Dragon glass blades sliced through Whites, turning them to brittle shards. Arrows ignited with holy flame soared overhead. The White Walkers, tall and gaunt, shattered men's swords with their own frigid blades. Screams filled the night. Melisandre shouted her prayers, each word fueling the fires that ringed the fortress. She heard the flapping of enormous wings above, Drogon wheeling to unleash a torrent of dragon fire on a knot of the dead that had breached the outer trench. The blazing inferno lit the night, revealing tens of thousands more corpses surging forward. The Night King was out there, Melisandre knew. She could almost feel his cold presence, a creeping dread that threatened to extinguish all hope. But Daenerys was hunting him from the sky, flanked by Rhaegal, each living dragon roaring defiance. Viserion's unholy screech answered, blasting shards of icy flame that melted ramparts and froze entire sections of the battlefield in grotesque sculptures of rime. Amid the chaos, Melisandre found herself face to face with a White Walker that had somehow scaled the wall. He advanced, tall as a wraith, eyes glowing blue. Icy mist trailed from his sword. Melisandre clutched a flaming torch in one hand. She began chanting a desperate prayer, thrusting the torch forward. "Lawler, protect me." The White Walker swung, and she only barely dodged, the blade slicing the air near her cheek. She thrust the torch at him, and flame licked at his pallid armor. For an instant, the Walker flinched. Then he raised his sword again. Death loomed in his eyes. But at that moment, a tall figure clad in black fur, a northern warrior, rammed a dragonglass-tipped spear into the Walker's back. The creature shrieked, cracked, and exploded into shards of ice. Melisandre, breathing hard, nodded her thanks to her savior before they rushed off to continue the fight. The night dragged on. For every yard of ground they gained, the dead pressed them back. People fell in droves. Melisandre's voice grew hoarse from chanting. She felt her strength ebbing, the fires receding. She prayed for dawn. If only the sun would rise. But the night was deep and cold, the wind howling. Above, dragons dueled in the sky, locked in terrible conflict. From time to time, she glimpsed Daenerys perched on Drogon's back, her face set like stone as she directed the dragonfire at the swarming undead. Then came a horrendous crash. The gates, battered by the weight of the whites, burst open. Undead flooded the courtyard. Jon Snow led the defenders in a fierce melee, but their lines faltered under the sheer numbers. Melisandre stumbled down the steps, feeling the final sparks of her power flicker. She could do no more from the walls. She saw the dead surge, swarming over living men and women, dragging them down. She wondered if the final darkness had come, if even Daenerys, with her dragons, could not turn the tide. Above them all, a roar of triumph sounded. Melisandre looked up in time to see Drogon pounce on the undead Viserion, clamping massive jaws on the rotted neck. A torrent of flame burst from Drogon's throat, engulfing the undead dragon's skull. Viserion shrieked, flailed, and then shattered in a burst of icy shards. Daenerys, half-frozen and bloodied, guided Drogon's descent. From the swirling snow appeared a figure on an undead horse, the Night King himself, his blue eyes reflecting no emotion. He lifted his spear of ice, aiming at Drogon's heart. Melisandre gasped, certain that this was the moment of final tragedy. But then Rhaegal, battered and bleeding, dove in from above, unleashing a tidal wave of fire. The Night King was forced to wheel his horse away. Daenerys seized the chance. She guided Drogon forward, unleashing a concentrated stream of dragon fire. The Night King sneered, raising his hand to deflect it as he had once before. But something was different now. Perhaps the presence of two dragons, both unleashing flame in unison, was too powerful even for him. Or perhaps the Lord of Light's blessing upon Daenerys burned hotter. In any case, the Night King faltered, the fire wrapping around him. He struggled, raising an arm as though to summon a blizzard. Then, in an explosion of sparks and cinders, the Night King was consumed. A piercing scream, louder than the wind, tore through the battlefield. The dead froze in place. One by one, as if a string had been cut, they crumpled to the ground in lifeless heaps. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged sobs of the living. The Great War had ended as suddenly as it began, in a burst of dragon fire. Daenerys slid from Drogon's back, stumbling in exhaustion. Jon Snow rushed forward to steady her. Melisandre watched, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. The White Walkers were no more. The endless night had been turned away. Dawn broke across the horizon in pale colors. The living gathered their wounded, tended to the dying, and burned the remains of the dead. Daenerys stood among them, her silver hair matted with blood, her face streaked with soot, but her posture proud. She gazed over the survivors, many of whom stared at her with awe and gratitude. She had faced the darkness, and she had won. Beside her, Drogon and Rhaegal stood, licks of flame dancing around their jaws. The North had always been wary of Targaryens, but on that morning, more than one Northerner knelt before her, tears in their eyes. Sansa Stark approached and softly said, "We owe you a great debt, your grace." Daenerys, her voice shaky with fatigue, said, "We fought together. Let us hope we can build a realm together." Melisandre, heart-pounding, walked up to the queen. "Your grace, I knew from the moment I saw you that you had a grand destiny. Now it is confirmed, you are Azor Ahai reborn. You have delivered the realm from the shadows, and for that, Lawler shines upon you." Daenerys turned to her. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips, though sorrow weighed heavily in her eyes. She thought of Viserion, lost to the Night King, of the countless people who had perished in the fight. "It is done. Yet I wonder what comes next. Melisandre looked out across the field of fallen corpses, the first rays of sunlight turning the snow to gold. You will lead, your grace. You will rule. If you still wish to sit the Iron Throne, you have more right to it now than ever. The realm will see that you are not simply a conqueror. You are its savior. Daenerys exhaled, her breath crystallizing in the crisp air. Then let us rebuild and let us remember the cost of the war. No throne can be worth such suffering unless it is used to protect the people. In the days that followed, word spread throughout Westeros of the great victory at Winterfell. Messengers rode south, proclaiming that Daenerys Targaryen had burned the Night King and saved the living. Some cast her as a fiery goddess, others as the rightful queen. Even those who had once resisted her claim began to see she was chosen by destiny, or at least by the savage hand of war. As winter slowly began to ease, Daenerys summoned the lords of the realm to treat with her. One by one, they came. Some out of fear, some out of gratitude, some to gauge her strengths. And one by one, they bent the knee. Through it all, Melisandre stood at Daenerys' side, a quiet figure in red, offering guidance where she could. She felt a sense of vindication. All her years of service, her mistakes, her unwavering belief in the prophecy, they had led to this moment when the dawn truly broke over the dark horizon. She saw how the realm embraced Daenerys' cause. She prayed that the new queen would rule with wisdom and mercy. After the horrors they had witnessed, there was no doubt in Melisandre's mind that Daenerys was the best hope for a lasting peace. Eventually, Daenerys traveled south to King's Landing, where the remnants of Cersei Lannister's forces yielded. The city opened its gates, battered by war, uncertain but resigned to the new reality. Dragon banners replaced the Gold Lion. Daenerys entered the Red Keep, her dragons circling overhead, a vivid reminder that the age of Targaryen power had returned. But this was not the old age of fear. Daenerys met with the people, walked among them. She listened to their concerns, promised justice. She offered mercy to her enemies who would swear fealty, though she refused to tolerate betrayals that might plunge the realm into further chaos. When the day came for Daenerys' coronation, Melisandre watched from a vantage near the dais. The High Lords and Ladies of Westeros stood in attendance, along with delegates from Dorne, the Vale, the Reach, and beyond. Jon Snow, though he preferred the cold north, had come to witness the crowning. Tyrion stood at Daenerys' side, serving as her hand, his face reflecting a curious mixture of pride and relief. The coronation itself was simple but dignified. Daenerys wore a gown of black and red, reminiscent of her house colors. She knelt briefly to receive the crown of Aegon from Ser Barristan's trembling hands. The crowd hailed her as Daenerys Stormborn, first of her name, Queen of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Protector of the Realm, the Mother of Dragons, the Breaker of Chains, the Savior from the Night. Melisandre closed her eyes as a cheer rose like thunder through the throne room. She touched the ruby at her throat in silent prayer. She felt the presence of Lawler, the Lord of Light, in the very air, an affirmation that Daenerys Targaryen stood as Azor Ahai reborn, the champion who had banished the darkness and now guided the living into a new dawn. The final puzzle piece of prophecy had fallen into place. Whatever came next, whether times of peace or new challenges, Melisandre believed with all her heart that Daenerys would face them with the unquenchable flame that burned inside her. And for the first time in many long years, Melisandre felt not doubt, but a quiet, steadfast certainty. She had chosen well in the end. Her faith had led her, at last, to the true light. In the hush that followed the cheers, Daenerys rose and ascended the steps of the Iron Throne. She turned, regarding the assembled crowd. For a moment, her gaze lingered on Melisandre. It was a look of acknowledgement, of gratitude, and perhaps of mutual understanding that, together, they had changed the course of history. Then Daenerys lifted her head high and spoke in a voice clear as a bell, resonant with the promise of a new era. "My lords and ladies of Westeros," she said, "we stand in the aftermath of a great darkness. We have endured untold suffering, but we have prevailed. Let us never forget the price we paid, nor the unity that carried us through. I swear to you now, I will dedicate my rule to preserving life, justice, and prosperity for all. The long night is over. May the day ahead be bright and the future full of hope." The throne room exploded into joyous applause. Melisandre joined in, tears glistening. This was the queen she had envisioned in the flames, a beacon for the living, a force that could unite men and women under one banner. She remembered her first arrival in Meereen, the cautious conversation with Daenerys on that tall pyramid. How far they had come, how much they had lost, and yet how much they had gained. It was a victory beyond crowns, it was the triumph of light over shadow. That night, in the Red Keep, a modest celebration was held. Lords and ladies mingled, old grudges set aside for the sake of the new order. Musicians played a soft tune and the torches crackled in the corridors. Daenerys walked among her guests, gracious and regal though fatigue lined her eyes. Tyrion poured wine for her, cautioning her not to overindulge. Jon Snow, still somewhat uncomfortable in the southern court, lingered near the outskirts of the hall, quietly greeting those who approached him. Sansa Stark looked about with a mixture of curiosity and reflection. The North had changed her, shaped her into a shrewd leader in her own right. Now she seemed almost at ease among the swirling figures in the candlelit space. Melisandre stayed apart from the revelry, standing at a window that overlooked the city. The moon hung pale in the sky, a sliver of silver above the black waters of Blackwater Bay. She thought of the battles, of the countless flames she had conjured. She thought of the future, the wars that might still arise, human ambition, envy, greed. Yet she believed Daenerys would handle them differently than her ancestors had. She was no mad king. She was a queen forged in the crucible of adversity who had braved both slavers and the undead. With Tyrion's counsel, with Jon Snow's alliance, with the loyal hearts of thousands, Daenerys would stand firm. Melisandre heard a step behind her. She turned to see Daenerys approach, wearing a quiet smile. "Why do you linger here, Red Priestess? Do you not join the celebration?" Melisandre inclined her head. "I have never been one for revels, your grace. My joy is in the moment of victory, in the knowledge that the Lord of Light's champion sits upon the throne." Daenerys leaned on the stone windowsill, gazing out. Below, the lights of King's Landing twinkled. "You said once you thought another man was this champion. Now that you have found me, what do you do next?" Melisandre's smile was faint. "I remain in service to the light. If you have no further need of me, I will wander, as I always have, seeking to spread the truth of R'hllor. But if you desire my counsel, I will stay, for I still believe in you and the realm you build." Daenerys considered, her violet eyes flicking over the city. "Stay for a time, at least. There is much rebuilding to do, many hearts to mend. I have seen your power. And though I am wary of any power that demands blood, I have also seen the good it can do in times of dire need. Perhaps we can find ways to bring hope without the horrors we once unleashed." Melisandre bowed her head. "I would like that very much, your grace." They stood in companionable silence, two women who had walked through fire and emerged changed. The hush of the night wrapped around them, punctuated by distant laughter from the banquet hall. At length, Daenerys straightened, her voice quiet. "I want to thank you, Melisandre. I might never have come to Westeros had you not helped me see the threat. I might have lingered in Essos until it was too late. Many lives were saved because you guided me." Melisandre closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the warmth of the queen's gratitude. "Thank me by ruling justly, by keeping your vow to protect the living. That is all I ask." Daenerys nodded, her expression solemn. Then she extended a hand. Melisandre accepted it, a gesture of trust sealed between them. And as they looked out upon the moonlit city, a city that had known so much bloodshed and might yet know more, they found solace in the knowledge that, for now, the worst darkness was banished. A new dawn had broken, carried on the wings of dragons and the unshakable will of a queen who dared to stand against the night. And in that dawn, Melisandre felt hope burn bright, like a red star in the eastern sky, promising that the future, however uncertain, belonged to the living and to the light. Daenerys Targaryen did not sleep that night. Long after the low music of the modest feast had faded and even Tyrion had taken his leave of the hall, she still found herself pacing the corridors of the Red Keep. The grand corridors were dimly lit by torches sputtering in iron brackets, their flames dancing in the slightest breeze. Occasionally, a guard stationed at an archway would bow as she passed. Each time, she would incline her head in a show of grace that she did not feel inwardly. The city sprawled below like a sleeping beast, King's Landing, the seat of power she had sought since her earliest days of exile across the sea. Yet, for all its storied grandeur, the castle around her felt haunted by the memory of a father she had never known, haunted by the wars and betrayals that had culminated in countless innocents dying on these streets. Now the Great War was over, she had helped banish the Night King and his armies, but she could not shake the weight of all she had witnessed, of all she had lost. She made her way onto a balustrade overlooking the gardens, the moon thin behind a swirl of clouds. Below her, she could see the tops of hedges interwoven with pale winter flowers, tended by the queen's own gardeners who had managed to coax some color from the cold soil. The distant hush of the Blackwater Bay lapping at the harbor walls was like a lullaby she could not answer. She pressed her hands to the smooth stone railing, remembering how she had once stood upon the walls of Meereen, looking out at a sea that had both beckoned and challenged her. It felt like a lifetime ago. Footsteps echoed on the flagstones behind her, light and careful. She did not need to look to know who approached. She felt the slightest tingle of warmth that emanated whenever the Red Priestess was near. Melisandre's presence had grown familiar these last months, a subtle glow in the air that marked the priestess's bond with her fires and her fervent god. Daenerys turned her head slightly and saw the red robes flutter. The older woman inclined her head. "Your Grace," Melisandre said quietly, "you have not found rest." "No," Daenerys admitted. She turned her gaze back out over the garden. "I suppose victory has unsettled me more than I might have guessed. In the songs, they do not speak of how it feels after the greatest war is won." Melisandre's voice was low, gentle. "The aftermath can be more difficult than the battle itself. You have looked upon horrors that should never have existed in this world. Now you must reconcile that with the living realm and find a way to lead." Daenerys let out a faint breath. "Yes, lead. I came here to claim the throne, but it feels as though I have 1,000 other burdens before I can even settle into being a queen. The city needs rebuilding, the realm must see unity, the wounds of this long conflict must be bound." She paused. "Will the people ever truly accept me? Or am I still the Targaryen exile with dragons and foreign armies?" Melisandre stepped closer, folding her arms in her long sleeves. "Many already revere you. In the north, they saw you risk your life in the snows beyond the wall. Here, they have heard tales of your stand against the dead. Even in Essos, your name carries legend. Some will fear you, that is inevitable, but others will follow out of gratitude and conviction. You have proven yourself a liberator more than once." Daenerys digested those words. "I suppose I must let time and deeds convince them. I will not win hearts with fire and blood alone." Her tone softened into something more reflective. "Thank you for being at my side. You have guided me even when I doubted the validity of your prophecies." Melisandre bowed her head once more, the ruby at her throat glinting. "I only followed the path the flames showed me. When I was younger, I believed in prophecy as though it were a strict destiny. But I have learned that even prophecies can be shaped by will. You have shaped yours, and in doing so, you have saved countless lives." She hesitated, then quietly added, "I am relieved that this time my faith was not misplaced." Daenerys turned fully, reaching out to rest a hand on Melisandre's arm. "It was never a certainty, but we have come through it. Now we must face the future together if that is what you still desire." Melisandre nodded solemnly. "I will stand with you for as long as I am able." The moment of shared understanding hung between them. Finally, Daenerys drew herself up, shoulders squared in a manner reminiscent of a warrior. "Let us speak in the morning of the tasks ahead. Tonight I will attempt to rest, though I know sleep will not come easily." She took her leave, making her way back inside to her chambers. The doors closed behind her, and the hush of the corridor soon returned. Melisandre lingered a moment longer, her eyes on the moonlit gardens, perhaps scrying something in the shifting shadows, or perhaps simply reflecting on how fate had brought them here. At length, she too withdrew, the tails of her red robes sweeping over the polished floor like living embers. When dawn arrived, pale light crept through the high windows of the throne room. Daenerys, invigorated by little more than fitful dozing, had summoned her core council to discuss immediate concerns. Tyrion stood with a stack of parchment under one arm. Ser Barristan Selmy, in polished armor, bowed gravely. Jon Snow was in attendance as well, though he would soon return to the north to oversee reconstruction efforts after the brutal war. Sansa Stark had decided to remain in King's Landing a while longer, ensuring that the North's voice was heard in the new order. In addition, a handful of southern lords who had bent the knee after hearing of Daenerys' triumph gathered at a respectful distance, waiting to be addressed. Daenerys sat upon the Iron Throne, conscious of how much symbolic power that seat commanded. She wanted to address the immediate tasks of forging a stable realm. "The first matter," she began, "is the distribution of supplies. War has left many harvests wanting, and the North especially will suffer if we do not send aid. We will see to it that King's Landing, Dragonstone, and other southern ports share what resources we have. We will gather ships to carry grain, salted fish, whatever can be spared, to White Harbor and the northern coasts. This winter is not over, but we will not let our people starve." Tyrion nodded and scribbled notes, looking relieved that she was taking this step so directly. "Of course, Your Grace. I will coordinate with the Master of Ships, and we should speak with the Lords of the Reach, as they still have farmland that may produce something even in these cold times." Jon Snow cleared his throat. "The people of the North will be grateful, Your Grace. We've managed so far, but with so many lives lost, we lack manpower for the fields. It is good to see Southern generosity." His face was somber, lines of fatigue deepening around his eyes. He had fought in the thick of it at Winterfell, lost many friends and allies. Now, though, he recognized that Daenerys' reign could bring something new, cooperation among realms that had once been fractured by petty rivalries. Daenerys accepted his gratitude with a slight dip of her chin. She then turned to Ser Barristan, who stood like a sentinel near one of the scorched columns. Ser Barristan, you have served my family for many years, and you have seen the workings of kings landing in your youth. What is your counsel on reintroducing law and order to a city that has known only chaos for so long? Ser Barristan bowed. Your grace, one of the keys to peace is ensuring the common folk feel safe. Your dragons do command respect, but for the day-to-day matters, the gold cloaks must be reformed. A new commander, loyal to you and your vision, must be appointed. We must root out corruption in the ranks. In my time, I saw how easily the City Watch could be swayed by gold or threat. Now is the time to choose men of integrity. She considered that. Very well. Do you have a man in mind for commander? He paused, gaze sliding across a few of the assembled knights. I have been watching a certain captain of the Unsullied who shows leadership qualities, though the people might not take easily to a foreigner. Alternatively, there are some knights from the Stormlands who served faithfully under me during the war. Each option has merits and drawbacks. Daenerys weighed the possibilities. I will consider your counsel. I need a commander who will keep the peace and be unyielding to bribes. If that means a foreigner from my own ranks or a knight from Westeros, so be it, so long as loyalty and honor are assured. She glanced at Tyrion for a moment. We will finalize this decision within the week. For now, ensure the current leadership of the Gold Cloaks is monitored. We cannot allow old loyalties to sabotage the realm. She continued to address one matter after another, from the organization of new trades with Essos to the question of how to reintegrate lords who once declared for Cersei Lannister. Those who bent the knee in earnest were spared, but Daenerys insisted on an oath of loyalty that included protections for the small folk, an oath that renounced slavery in any form. Subtly, there were questions about restitution for families torn by war. It was a monumental effort, an empire-building exercise at the end of a cataclysm. By the time she concluded that council, her head ached. She thanked those assembled and rose from the throne, her black and red gown trailing behind her as she retreated into the solar, flanked by Tyrion and Melisandre. In the quiet privacy of that solar, sunlight streamed through stained glass, revealing dust motes in the air. Melisandre poured water into silver cups and offered them around. Daenerys gratefully sipped, letting the cool liquid soothe her dry throat. Tyrion set his parchment aside and ran a hand over his face. We have done well to handle so many issues in one session, but the realm is still a labyrinth of problems. There are lords who wish to remain independent, others who fear your dragons, and yet others who see an opportunity to rise in your service. Navigating this will be delicate. Daenerys offered a faint smile. I know. I promise not to rule by fear alone. I do not want the realm to cower under my dragons. Yet a firm hand is needed. We must find a balance or risk plunging into new conflicts. Melisandre's voice was gentle. Your Grace, you have always been adept at winning people's hearts when they see your sincerity. In Meereen, you freed thousands of slaves and they adored you for that. Here, many of the common folk have never experienced such devotion from a monarch. If we can show them that your reign improves their lives and does not simply rely on force, they will embrace you. Daenerys touched her friend's hand in thanks. Yes, I remember how it felt in Essos when the freedmen called me Mysa. The Seven Kingdoms are different, but perhaps the essence remains the same. If I can bring them hope, they will not hate me for my power. Tyrion gave a small nod. Well said. We'll keep it day by day. Then, with a slight shift of posture, he ventured, and there is the matter of your personal life, your grace, namely, alliances you might forge through marriage. Daenerys' brows lifted. Marriage? You are not the first to bring that up. Some lords have already begun sending veiled inquiries. They want a Targaryen match to strengthen ties. It seems half the realm would see me wed to one of their sons or brothers. Tyrion's expression was diplomatic. It's a time-honored tradition to seal a new dynasty with a well-chosen marriage. But I also recall the complexities of love and power. You have always chosen your own path in that regard. Still, it is an option to consider. She drew a measured breath, remembering losses, Dario Naharis, whom she had once left behind in Meereen, and others who had touched her heart. She also recalled the subtle affections that had passed between her and Jon Snow in the midst of war, an unspoken bond that had formed and then been tempered by the enormity of the battles they fought. I'll decide when the time is right, she said, not unkindly. For now, let us focus on bringing stability. Westeros has had enough sudden changes. I do not wish to be pressured into anything so personal merely for political gain. Tyrion inclined his head, leaving the matter at that. After a few more brief discussions, Daenerys dismissed them, feeling the press of fatigue. She decided to leave the keep for a while, to walk among the people incognito. It was a notion that Tyrion had once said might help her understand the city's pulse, much as she had done in Essos. Though King's Landing was far larger and in some corners far more dangerous, she believed if she truly wanted to rule with empathy, she must see what her new subjects faced in their daily lives. That afternoon, she donned a plain cloak over a simple dress, accompanied by Melisandre and a small handful of trusted guards disguised as common men. They exited through a smaller postern gate to avoid drawing a crowd, weaving into the narrow streets. The city was still partially scarred from the wars, rubble in certain alleyways, buildings blackened by old fires. The stench of the poorer districts, Flea Bottom, rose in waves. But the people moved about their business, a subdued resilience in their steps. Daenerys kept her hood low, breathing in the city's reality. They passed a group of children playing a game with stones and chalk lines on the ground. The children turned curious gazes upon them, and one of the guards offered them a friendly wave. Daenerys observed how thin they looked. War had left them half-starved. A pang of pity gripped her. She paused to fish out a small coin from her purse and handed it to the oldest child. He looked at her, wide-eyed, as though he expected some trick. She smiled gently. "Get yourselves something to eat," she murmured. He darted forward, took the coin, and scurried back to his siblings who huddled around it, discussing excitedly. They continued on, stepping carefully over broken cobbles. Along one street, a group of ragged men squatted near a boarded-up shop front. Two of them seemed to be missing limbs, perhaps from old battles. They were telling stories in low voices, occasionally cursing King Joffrey or Cersei or any number of past figures. Daenerys paused to listen, quiet. When one man spotted her, or at least saw her cloak, he spat. "We was promised help by the new queen, but we got nothing. No bread, no coin, just the same old city watch that hardly lifts a finger for the small folk." Melisandre's posture tensed, but Daenerys held out a hand, cautioning her to remain silent. She wanted to hear it. Another man grunted. "Dunno. Word is, she fought the undead in the north. Maybe she's better than the rest of him." A bitter laugh. "We'll see if that puts food in our bellies." Daenerys let their words wash over her. She could feel the tension of her own disguised guards, uncertain if they should intervene. But she gave them the smallest shake of her head. Then she moved on, though the men's complaints echoed in her mind. This was the burden of rule. Many believed wholeheartedly in her, but many more had yet to see tangible improvements in their daily lives. She could not expect instant reverence just because she wore a crown and had dragons. She needed to enact real changes. She and Melisandre ventured deeper, eventually coming upon a small gathering near the reeking waters of the Blackwater Rush. A man in plain robes was preaching to a small crowd about the Mother's Mercy, a sermon from the Faith of the Seven. He spoke of how the new queen had been chosen by the gods to deliver the living from the dead, weaving her deeds into a vaguely religious narrative. Some in the crowd listened, heads bowed. Others looked skeptical. Daenerys watched from behind her hood, unsettled by the notion that she was being spun into a holy figure once more, a pattern she had seen in Essos with the Lawler faith. She did not want to be worshipped blindly. Adoration too easily slipped into fanaticism. And yet, if that devotion fostered unity, she would not rebuke it entirely. Navigating such nuance was a never-ending challenge. They moved on until they reached the edge of the street market, where peddlers hawked stale bread, salted fish, and meager vegetables. Daenerys saw the prices were high and the quality was low. One fishmonger haggled fiercely with a mother who cradled a crying child, trying to stretch her coppers. The fishmonger refused to budge, citing the risk he took acquiring goods from the outskirts where brigands might still prowl. Daenerys felt an ache of anger and pity swirl within her. How to fix this? She would need time, resources, proper distribution. No single decree would magically feed everyone. But seeing their plight firsthand resolved her to push the realm's lords into providing relief as soon as possible. After the sobering tour, Daenerys headed back to the Red Keep, her heart heavy. She had glimpsed both hope and hardship, gratitude and bitterness, fear and longing. It would be a long journey to create the realm she envisioned, where people were not forced to beg for scraps. She might never fully succeed, but she would try. That night, as she dined in a quiet chamber with Melisandre, Tyrion, and a few others, she told them what she had seen. Tyrion listened with a pensive expression, occasionally letting out a sigh. Melisandre's brow furrowed at mention of the starving children. Jon, who had come in for a brief audience from the north, nodded grimly. In Winterfell, we face a similar struggle. Too many bodies to bury, not enough to harvest. We do what we can. Daenerys glanced at Jon. I want to accelerate the shipments from the Reach. We'll pay a fair price for their produce, but the lords must understand we need large quantities. We'll deal with potential bandits by providing armed escorts for the caravans. I'll write to the Tyrell banners, Tyrion said. They may not love me for it, but we can persuade them that supporting the crown's humanitarian efforts will ensure good standing once the realm recovers. Sansa, who had joined them quietly, added in a low voice, and if they resist, we threaten them with dragons. She said it with a small, wry smile, half-joking. But Daenerys caught the undercurrent of seriousness. She considered, I'd rather not resort to threats for every negotiation. But they should know I will not tolerate greed when thousands starve. Sansa nodded, and that was that. The meal continued, subdued, until Daenerys finally excused herself. She left the rest to talk among themselves, Tyrion and Jon discussing trade routes, Melisandre diligently taking notes, Sansa interjecting with northern concerns. The queen withdrew to her private chambers, longing for a moment of quiet. She was surprised to find Melisandre waiting at the threshold as if anticipating her arrival. Melisandre bowed her head, pressing her palm against the door to indicate her willingness to speak if the queen wished. Dean. Rhys beckoned her inside with a faint gesture. The chambers were warm, lit by a few flickering braziers. Shadows danced across the walls. What news, Red Priestess? Daenerys asked softly. She removed the traveling cloak she still wore from her tour of the city, draping it over a chair. You are welcome to share counsel if something troubles you. Melisandre's eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. I wish to inform you that I have been approached by some within the city who wish to build a temple to Lawler in your honor. They see you as Azor Ahai Reborn, the living flame that banished the dead. They would raise altars, gather followers. Daenerys's lips parted in a small sigh. Another faith praising me? I've already seen the preachers of the Seven attributing my deeds to their gods. The last thing we need is religious conflict in King's Landing. Melisandre inclined her head. I share your concern. My own faith has taught me that zeal can become a blade that cuts both ways. I do not wish for these new believers to become dogmatic. However, a temple might also be a place of healing, of distributing charity, an asset in times of famine. Daenerys paused, thinking of the children she had just seen, the impoverished men cursing the monarchy. If a temple can serve the people, provide them with warmth, food, or hope, I will not stand in its way. But I want no forced conversions, no burning of icons of other gods. We have seen enough of that kind of fanaticism. Is that understood, Melisandre? The Red Priestess placed a hand on her own chest, inclining her head. I understand, Your Grace. I will ensure that those who follow Lawler in this city know your will on this matter. We shall not become the tyrants of faith we once fought. Daenerys' stance relaxed slightly. Thank you. I trust you will keep it so. She gestured to a seat near the brazier, inviting Melisandre to sit. She herself sank onto a cushioned chair, letting out a weary breath. Tell me, do you foresee any further threats? I know the White Walkers are gone, but the living have a habit of conjuring new perils. Melisandre was silent for a moment, the flames reflecting in her eyes. I have gazed into the fires, but the visions are uncertain. Sometimes I see glimpses of a shadow on the western seas, raiders, perhaps the Ironborn. Other times I see the flicker of a golden lion's banner, but whether it signals war or mere memory, I cannot be sure. The flames are not as direct as I once believed. They grant us possibilities, and it is up to us to shape them. She paused. But I do feel an unease. Darkness does not vanish so easily. One battle is won, yet human hearts remain susceptible to fear and ambition. Daenerys inclined her head in acceptance. That is not surprising. We have Euron Greyjoy at large, last I heard. He vanished off the coast after the war ended, presumably to gather whatever reavers remain loyal to him. And the Lannisters. Well, Tyrion is the last official Lannister of the primary line, but there may be distant cousins lurking somewhere. Yet for the moment, the throne is secure. I have to focus on the well-being of the people, or else we risk breeding more discontent. They spoke softly for a while longer, the conversation turning on subtle concerns, the possible resurgence of old factions, the rebuilding of alliances. Melisandre listened attentively, offering the occasional insight gleaned from her own experience with ruling councils, albeit mostly from her time advising Stannis, an episode she referenced only sparingly. Eventually, Daenerys' eyelids grew heavy, the day's burdens pressing upon her. Melisandre departed with a bow, leaving the queen to her rest. In the coming weeks, Daenerys poured herself into the governance of King's Landing with a tireless fervor. She convened with the City Watch, choosing a new commander, a knight from Tarth, recommended by Brienne for his fairness and discipline. The Gold Cloaks underwent a partial reorganization, with corruption rooted out where it could be proven. She approved the establishment of a small temple to Lawler on the far side of the city where the poorest districts lay. True to her word, she insisted it double as a charitable shelter, distributing warmth and food with no forced creed. Some residents were wary, remembering the excesses of the faith militant or the fanaticism of the Red Faith in other lands, but over time, curiosity and desperation led people to accept hot meals and shelter from the biting chill. Melisandre sometimes appeared there, praying softly over the flames, offering blessings to any who wished them. It was a modest beginning, but it eased the suffering of a corner of the city that might otherwise have been forgotten. News from the wider realm trickled in through ravens and traveling envoys. The Vale had fared better than most during the winter, protected by its mountains, and Lord Royce acknowledged Daenerys' claim as rightful queen, so long as the Vale's neutrality and customs were respected. The Riverlands, ravaged by years of war, pleaded for help rebuilding. Daenerys dispatched a contingent of masons and carpenters along with shipments of grain. The Iron Islands remained a mystery. There were rumors that Euron Greyjoy had vanished into the Sunset Sea, leaving behind only scattered ships under smaller captains. Some reavers still attacked the western coasts, but without the unity that once threatened the mainland. Yara Greyjoy, loyal to Daenerys, wrote that she was doing her best to secure the islands, but old rivalries ran deep. Meanwhile, Jon Snow returned north, taking with him Sansa and a portion of the northern levy. They had pledged fealty to Daenerys, but their home needed them. Before leaving, Jon took Daenerys aside, a quiet moment in the castle's garden where the last leaves were falling from skeletal branches. She recalled the nights they had huddled in the icy wilderness, forging a bond in the face of the undead. Now, in the mild air of the southern capital, that bond felt distant but not forgotten. He said softly, "I will not forget what you did for my people. We will stand by you should you ever need us. The north is yours as it was ours." Daenerys smiled, a touch wistful. "Thank you, Jon. And the north is yours, for you know it best. Rule it wisely. One day, I hope to see it flourish, free from the terrors that once plagued it." He nodded, hesitating. There was a moment when they almost spoke of deeper things, the grief that lingered for those lost, the spark that had once flickered between them. But the moment passed in silence, replaced by a mutual understanding that each had chosen a road of duty above personal longing. He took his leave with solemn courtesy, and Daenerys was left standing beneath the half-bare trees, lost in thought. The realm's slow reconstruction continued. One day, Tyrion came to Daenerys with a wry smile, reporting that a certain Sells-word captain from Essos had arrived in the city, seeking an audience with the queen. Daenerys' heart gave a little start. It was Daario Naharis. She had not expected to see him again, having left him in Meereen to keep the peace. Yet here he was, presumably with tidings of Essos. She met him in a small reception hall, flanked by Barristan and Missandei. Daario strode in, still handsome, his flamboyant manner somewhat tempered by the responsibilities that had weighed on him in Meereen. He bowed in an exaggerated flourish. "Your Grace, it has been too long." His eyes flicked over her as though measuring what had changed. Daenerys gestured for him to stand, her own face carefully composed. "Daario, I trust Meereen remains at peace." He grinned, though there was something tentative about it. "Peace, yes, though hardly quiet. The Sons of the Harpy have been crushed, but the city still grapples with shifting power dynamics. The Freedmen's Council rules in your name, and they have done surprisingly well maintaining order. I helped, of course, though I tried to leave governing to those who prefer parchment to swords." He cleared his throat. "But it seems the council has things in hand, so I took the liberty of coming here to see if you had need of me." Daenerys observed him, recalling their past intimacy and the decision she had made to leave him behind for the greater good. She felt a pang of old fondness, but also an awareness that life had changed drastically since those days. "If Meereen no longer needs you to enforce stability, then I am grateful it has progressed that far. As for needing you here, the war is done. We face a different kind of battle, one of rebuilding. There is work to be done, but it is not the work of the Sells-word's blade." Daario nodded, trying to hide a flicker of disappointment. "I understand, my queen. Still, I thought perhaps you would have a place for an old ally by your side." She studied him for a moment before replying, her tone gentle. "I cannot promise you the excitement you once craved. But if you wish to remain to help keep order or oversee matters of security, I can find a role for you in the Crown's service. I will not turn away someone who has proven loyal." A flash of relief crossed his features. "I'll take what I can get. I find I'm not as addicted to chaos as I once was. Age, perhaps?" She managed a small smile. Good then. Speak with Ser Barristan. We'll determine how best to employ your skills. A deliberate pause. It's good to see you again, Dario. He placed his hand over his heart in a courtly gesture. And you, your grace. With that he withdrew. Melisandre, standing to one side, quietly observed the exchange, no doubt recalling all that had transpired in Essos. Daenerys cast her a knowing glance. Melisandre offered only a small shrug, as if to say, the past is the past and we move onward. Indeed, everything had changed. As autumn gave way to the deeper clutches of winter, milder in the south but still formidable, Daenerys busied herself with a realm that was slowly beginning to breathe again. Under her direction, roads were repaired, trade routes reopened, alliances strengthened. She sent ambassadors to Dorne, where the Martell line had been shattered, but new leadership was emerging that tentatively recognized her claim. On one chilly morning, a raven arrived from Braavos. The Iron Bank, which had once lent gold to various Westerosi factions, now extended an offer to negotiate new financial terms with the crown. Tyrion, intrigued, ventured that Daenerys could secure a loan under fair conditions, enough to jumpstart building projects throughout the war-torn areas. The Queen, after some consideration, agreed to begin negotiations, though she remained wary of the Iron Bank's infamously sharp dealing. Throughout these efforts, Melisandre's presence lingered like a steady glow in the background. The Red Priestess did not press her visions upon the Queen as fervently as she once had with Stannis. Instead, she acted more like a spiritual advisor, occasionally pointing out subtle omens or cautioning Daenerys when some paths seemed ominous in the fires. But she did not claim absolute certainty, acknowledging that the future was shaped by countless choices. From time to time, Daenerys would accompany her to the small temple in the slums, observing the lines of hungry souls who came for bread and a chance to sit near the brazier's warmth. She saw how Melisandre and a handful of red-robed acolytes prayed over the sick, offered them spiced wine, or simply listened to their woes. It was an odd sight, a foreign faith tending to Westerosi subjects, but it seemed to ease the city's burdens. Little by little, a respect for the Red Woman grew among those who had once seen her as a mysterious threat. One crisp evening, Daenerys held a modest feast for the small council and a few visiting lords in the Great Hall. The crackling fires in the massive hearths kept the chill at bay. Minstrels played soft tunes. Servants carried trays of roast venison, crusty bread, and honeyed wine. It was a far cry from the lavish banquets of old, but it was a statement that the realm was healing enough to celebrate small achievements. Melisandre was there, seated quietly among the courtiers. Dario mingled with knights, exchanging tales of battles from Essos. Lord Gendry Baratheon, who had recently been legitimized by royal decree, drank and laughed with some of the Stormland knights, forging a sense of camaraderie that might bind old loyalties. Daenerys, seated at the head of the table, listened to the various conversations swirl. Tyrion sat beside her, occasionally leaning over to whisper a sardonic remark. Melisandre was on her other side, graceful and observant. The Queen noted how the lords from different corners of Westeros appeared relaxed, if still a bit cautious. She felt a momentary surge of pride. The wars were over, the White Walkers vanquished, and the realm was no longer splintered into warring factions. This was a semblance of what she had always wanted: unity, stability, a chance for people to live without fear. Midway through the feast, she rose, tapping her cup gently for attention. Conversations hushed and all eyes turned to her. She felt their anticipation, the silent question, what will our queen decree next? My lords and ladies, she began, our realm has suffered greatly in the past years. We have known invaders, betrayal, war, and the threat of a darkness beyond our comprehension. We stood together in the end and we prevailed. For that, I thank each of you, whether you fought on the battlefield, tended the wounded, or simply kept hope alive when all seemed lost. Today, we look forward. The realm requires rebuilding, and that is not an easy task. Yet I believe we can do it. Each corner of Westeros has its strength. The north has its resilience, the Vale its stability, the Riverlands its fertile plains, the Reach its abundance, the Stormlands its fortitude, Dorne its fierce independence, the Westerlands its riches. Let each region prosper, and let us share what we have so that the scars of war might heal. She paused, scanning the faces, seeing nods and thoughtful gazes. I have no illusions that we will agree on everything. Disagreements are inevitable. But I promise you this, I will hear your concerns and I will strive to rule with justice. The dragons are a symbol of House Targaryen's power, yes, but let them also be a symbol of what we can do if we rise from ashes and reach for the skies. A murmur of approval spread through the hall. She felt a warmth in her chest, remembering Drogon and Rhaegal perched somewhere above in the night air, the living flames that had turned back the winter's greatest threat. Her words were not empty rhetoric. She meant to shape Westeros into a place better than the one she had found. After the feast, as the guests dispersed into smaller clusters of conversation or departed to their chambers, Daenerys walked along the corridor with Tyrion. She asked him quietly, "Do you think they truly believe in this future we're offering?" He pursed his lips. "Some do. Some are trying to see if you can truly deliver on your promises. But from what I saw, they are far more confident tonight than they would have been under Cersei or a divided crown." A wry smile curled his mouth. "You've come far, Your Grace. Remember that next time you're overwhelmed by the tasks ahead." She nodded gratefully and parted ways with him, continuing on until she stepped into a courtyard open to the night sky. The stars glittered overhead. She felt the crisp air on her cheeks. Suddenly, a gust of wind whooshed, and Regal came gliding over the ramparts, landing on a broad ledge with surprising grace for a creature of his size. He let out a low rumble in greeting. Daenerys approached, placing a hand on the green ambron scales of his neck. Once she had soared on his back, though Drogon remained her primary mount. He sniffed at her hair, exhaling warm breath that smelled faintly of sulfur. She looked up at him, murmuring, "You've grown so much. You and your brother saved the realm." Her throat tightened, recalling Viserion's loss, the twisted visage of him in undead form. In that moment, she felt the rush of all she had endured: exile, betrayal, love, war, and the annihilation of a threat older than memory. The sorrow and triumph mingled like two sides of a coin. She lingered there for a time, letting the dragon's presence calm her. Then she made her way to the ramparts, from which she could see the flickering lights of King's Landing spread below. It was late, and the streets were subdued, but now and then she heard distant shouts or laughter. The city was alive, for better or worse. A voice spoke from behind. "He's restless, isn't he?" "Both of them are." It was Melisandre, her robes blending into the dark as though she had stepped out of the shadows. Daenerys didn't startle. She merely inclined her head. "They prefer open skies and new frontiers. Sometimes I wonder if I should let them roam free. But for now, they remain near me as guardians to the realm and symbols of my rule." Melisandre approached the edge of the rampart, gazing down at the city lights. "You do not fear that one day the realm may come to resent their power? I recall how men once whispered of the Targaryens who used dragons to terrify the kingdoms into submission." Daenerys' expression hardened slightly. "I will not use them to terrorize. They exist to protect, to remind the realm that we have a living flame within our grasp. It is a burden, but one I will bear." Melisandre folded her hands. "Indeed, a burden. One that my faith acknowledges as the blessing of Lawler. But you have always walked that fine line between destruction and salvation. Even in Essos, you had to temper your anger to avoid cruelty. I only mention it because I have seen how power can corrode the hearts of the best men and women. But I believe you are wise enough to guard against it." Daenerys' pulse quickened. "I will not become like my father, if that is what you imply." The Red Priestess shook her head. "I know you will not. I have gazed into your eyes since the day we met. I saw the determination, yes, but also the compassion. That is why I remain at your side, to remind you, should the flame ever burn too hot, that it can also be tempered. A queen who understands both mercy and justice is what this land needs." Daenerys exhaled, letting her tension slip away. "Thank you, Melisandre. I appreciate your honesty. And I promise you, if ever you see me straying from my path, you have my leave to tell me so." Perhaps that was Stannis' greatest flaw. He banished counsel that disagreed with him. Melisandre's eyes flickered with a shadow of regret. "That was partly my fault too. I saw the king I believed chosen by the Lord of Light, and I refused to doubt him. This time I will not let blind faith overshadow truth." She placed a hand lightly on Daenerys' arm. "Come, it grows cold. Let us return inside before the night's chill stiffens our bones." They turned and walked together back into the castle, side by side, the soft glow of torches guiding their steps. Behind them, Regal huffed and launched into the air, wingbeats echoing across the rooftops as he sought a place to roost or perhaps to hunt. The city remained watchful, a tapestry of flickering lights and hidden corners as queen and priestess disappeared beyond the great doors. Days turned into weeks, and the queen's labors bore fruit. Grain from the Reach and the Stormlands flooded the markets, lowering prices for the small folk. The City Watch, under its new commander, began cracking down on criminal gangs that had thrived in the chaos of the war. Reports trickled in from the riverlands that roads were being rebuilt with the Crown's backing. Even the Iron Bank, after lengthy negotiations with Tyrion, agreed to lend funds at a reduced interest rate, impressed by the realm's progress under the new queen. A cautious optimism spread among the people. Yet not all was tranquil. Whispers reached Daenerys' ears of a group calling themselves the Sons of Aegon, a clandestine band of Targaryen loyalists who wanted to see a harsher enforcement of her rule. They were rumored to be harassing any lord who had once fought under Cersei's banner, leaving behind cryptic messages about the wrath of dragons. Daenerys, upon hearing this, was incensed. She summoned the gold cloaks and demanded they root out these zealots. "I will not suffer extremists in my name," she declared, her voice echoing in the throne room. It was a painful reminder that fanaticism could arise from those claiming to support her, just as easily as from those who opposed her. Around this time, a raven arrived from the west. Lord Gawain Westerling, nominally sworn to the crown, warned of renewed Ironborn raids near Fair Isle and Lannisport. These attacks were scattered but brutal, suggesting that scattered captains loyal to Euron Greyjoy were testing the waters. Daenerys convened a war council, deciding that she would dispatch a small fleet, commanded by one of her trusted admirals from Essos, to patrol the western coast and hunt down raiders. She also sent word to Yara Greyjoy to coordinate a response, hoping to quell this threat before it could grow. Such matters pulled at her daily, a dozen new fires flaring across the realm. And so she juggled diplomacy with the call for peace and the occasional necessity of force. Through it all, her dragons remained a potent symbol. When a recalcitrant lord refused to pay taxes or harbored outlaws, Daenerys would dispatch a winged envoy, Drogon, or regal passing overhead. Often, the sight alone was enough to bring swift compliance. "It is better to use the threat of dragons than the dragons themselves," she said to Tyrion one afternoon, remembering all too vividly the terror such creatures could unleash. Tyrion dryly replied, "Indeed, it's an effective deterrent, so long as you use it sparingly enough that it retains its power." Those were days of tireless work, tempered by small joys. Sometimes Daenerys visited the city in secret, watching the mood of the people. She noticed more children playing in the squares, fewer lying hungry in the gutters. The new Lawler Temple offered nightly meals, while the Septs of the Faith of the Seven also reopened to provide charity, each competing in acts of benevolence rather than violence. It seemed a curious harmony, tenuous but real. She thanked the gods, both the Seven and Lawler, as well as her own Targaryen ancestors, that the city had not yet descended into religious strife. Meanwhile, Melisandre's presence remained a quiet constant. Sometimes Daenerys would find her in the Great Hall, gazing into a brazier's flames, lips moving in silent prayer. Other times she would be out in the slums, ministering to the sick. Occasionally, she would vanish to some remote part of the keep for hours, presumably to scry in private or to rest from the demands of her calling. When Daenerys asked her once if she intended to leave King's Landing, the Red Priestess merely smiled cryptically and said, "Not yet, Your Grace. There is still a purpose for me here." One evening, Daenerys was taking a rare moment to herself in the castle library, a place she had only recently begun to frequent. Rows of old tomes lined the shelves, many of them damaged or scattered during the wars. She found solace in reading about the history of Targaryen rule, the records of her forebears, trying to glean lessons from their triumphs and mistakes. She was paging through a volume that detailed the conquests of Aegon the Unlikely, Aegon V, when the door opened quietly and Tyrion entered. He bowed slightly. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I didn't realize you were here. I was told I might find a certain volume on Essosi trade routes, but I can return later." She waved a hand. "No, stay. This library is not mine alone. You may search at your leisure." He nodded in gratitude and began scanning the shelves. After a few moments of companionable silence, he found the text he wanted, though it was battered and missing a corner. He joined Daenerys at the table, carefully opening the pages. She continued reading, but after a while, she glanced at him and said, "Tyrion, may I ask you something?" He looked up. "Always, Your Grace." She set her own volume aside, leaning on her elbows. "When you advised rulers in the past, like your father or Joffrey, did you ever believe they could truly shape the realm for the better? Or was it merely a matter of survival and power?" He pursed his lips thoughtfully. "With my father, it was always about power and legacy. With Joffrey, it was more like containing a rabid dog, if I may be frank. I did not believe in their capacity for altruistic leadership." He paused, tapping a finger on the open page. "But I did what I could to mitigate harm. With you, it's different. I see a chance for genuine progress. I see you actually caring for the people, not just the lords. It's refreshing, if still a bit overwhelming." She smiled faintly, looking down at her hands. "I care, yes. But I worry constantly if I'm doing enough, if I'm making the right choices. The consequences are so immense." Tyrion's gaze softened. "You're doing more than anyone has in recent memory. The realm is recovering. Of course, new problems will arise. There will always be schemers, rebels, and tragedies we can't foresee. But so far, you've navigated them with more grace than any of your predecessors. Don't underestimate the power of that." They shared a small, companionable silence. Then Daenerys let out a slow breath. "Thank you. Sometimes I need the reminder." She glanced at the old tapestry on the wall depicting a dragon's silhouette. "I used to think the throne was my destiny. Now I see that destiny is more complicated." He closed the book, stowing it under his arm. "Destiny always is, but it's your will that shapes it. Shall we retire for the evening, Your Grace?" She nodded, rising from her seat. "Yes. We have another council session at dawn. More petitioners from the Vale, I believe." They left together, the library's torches guttering behind them. As they stepped into the corridor, the distant roars of a dragon echoed through the night. Tyrion gave her a sideways glance. "At least some things remain constant," he joked, though he looked faintly uneasy. Daenerys merely smiled. The dragons were her children, constant reminders of her lineage and her role as protector. She prayed to all the gods that she would never fail them. Not many days later, a hush fell over King's Landing with the arrival of a battered ship at the Blackwater harbor. It carried a small band of survivors from the western coasts, fisherfolk who had fled an Ironborn raid. They spoke of black-sailed ships emerging from the mist, led by a monstrous figure in scaled armor with a patch over one eye and a cruel grin. Whether it was Euron Greyjoy himself or another maddened captain who had taken up his banner, none could say for certain. But they recounted how the raiders sacked a fishing village, dragged captives onto their ships, and set the huts aflame. The small council convened at once to address the threat. "They're testing our response," Tyrion remarked grimly. "If this continues, the Western lords will grow restless. They'll want you to punish these raiders with fire." Dario, leaning against a marble pillar, chimed in, "Send me, Your Grace. Give me a fleet, a portion of your Unsullied, and I'll drive those Ironborn dogs beneath the waves." Ser Barristan looked thoughtful. "A swift strike might be effective. We could coordinate with Yara's loyal Ironborn who remains stationed around Pike. Together, we could trap these marauders at sea." Daenerys stood at the head of the table, arms folded. She had known that the relative peace was too good to last. The world still had pockets of cruelty that flourished whenever there was an opportunity. "I will not allow them to terrorize our coasts," she said firmly. "Yes, Dario, you shall command a fleet. Ser Barristan, select the Unsullied who are most adept at naval operations. Tyrion, ensure we have enough provisions to sustain this expedition. I want them to set sail within the fortnight." They nodded. Dario's face lit with anticipation of action, but Daenerys held up a hand. "One more thing, this is not a war of conquest. We are not launching a full-scale invasion of the Iron Islands. We only target the raiders. If there are any legitimate Ironborn settlements uninvolved in these raids, leave them be. We do not punish the innocent for the crimes of the guilty." Dario bowed. "Understood. I'll keep it precise. Though with the Ironborn, innocence can be hard to find," he added dryly. Daenerys' expression hardened. "Then you will look carefully. I do not intend to repeat the mistakes of the past, burning entire populations and calling it justice. Is that clear?" He inclined his head. "Clear, Your Grace." Within days, ships bearing Daenerys' royal sigil departed from the Blackwater, with Dario Naharis at the helm of the lead galley. Aboard were ranks of Unsullied in newly fitted leathers suitable for maritime operations and a few knights with experience in sea battles. The plan was to link up with Yara's forces near the Fair Isle. Daenerys stood on the castle walls, watching as the sails diminished on the horizon. A mixture of resolve and anxiety stirred in her gut. She hated having to send men to fight once more after everything the realm had endured, but she could not sit idle while innocent villages burned. As the weeks passed, word of scattered skirmishes trickled back. Dario's fleet clashed with Ironborn reavers near a rocky outcrop off the coast, sinking 2 raiding vessels and capturing another. The news was heartening until a subsequent raven brought word that the reavers had struck deeper south near the Shield Islands. It was a game of cat and mouse, the Ironborn harrying vulnerable coasts, then slipping away before a decisive battle. Daenerys grew restless, wishing she could mount Drogon and scour the seas from above. But that would mean leaving King's Landing undefended, and she could not simply depart her seat of power whenever there was a raid. She had to trust her commanders. During this tension, Melisandre continued her quiet vigilance, occasionally telling Daenerys she had glimpsed fleeting images in the flames, ships locked in combat, water swirling with blood. The silhouette of a man with a terrifying grin raising a curved blade to the sky. "Take care," she would warn. "The sea is not the domain of the Lord of Light. It is full of old spirits and illusions. Our sight may be clouded there." Daenerys accepted these warnings, though she could do little but wait. At last, after more than a month of chase, Dario's fleet cornered a band of reavers near the rocky coastline south of Lannisport. The ensuing battle was fierce but conclusive. The reavers' flagship was captured and a one-eyed Ironborn captain was slain, though it turned out not to be Euron Greyjoy, merely a vicious lieutenant. The rest of the Ironborn scattered, some abandoning their ships to swim ashore and vanish among the coves. The raids subsided for the time being, leaving the west in a guarded calm. Dario returned to King's Landing with a handful of captured Ironborn in chains. He presented them to Daenerys in the throne room where a small assembly of Western lords had gathered to witness the Queen's judgment. They recounted the atrocities these men had committed: murder, theft, abduction. Daenerys rose from the Iron Throne, her face an impassive mask. "You chose to terrorize my people even after the wars that nearly destroyed this realm. For that, you forfeit your lives." She paused, letting the hush weigh in the air. "But I will not have you flayed or tortured. Your deaths will be swift by the sword. Let this be the only warning to those who think to prey upon the weak." Her sentence was carried out immediately, a clean beheading in the courtyard under the watchful gaze of gold cloaks. Some lords murmured that it was too merciful, others that it was too harsh. Daenerys listened to neither. She held fast to the principle that justice must be direct, not prolonged cruelty, and certainly not the disregard for life that had marked previous regimes. When it was done, she returned to the throne room where she found Dario waiting, a thoughtful expression on his face. He bowed with a flourish. "The seas are quieter, Your Grace. For now, the Ironborn are scattered. Yara's forces remain vigilant." Daenerys nodded, unsmiling. "You've done well. Thank you. But keep your men ready in case we hear more trouble." Dario acquiesced, though the excitement in his eyes had dimmed slightly. "Of course. However, if the realm is at peace, perhaps we should consider expansions to our trade across the Narrow Sea. I have contacts in Volantis and Pentos that could I." She lifted a hand. "One thing at a time, Dario. The realm has many concerns. I appreciate your ideas, but my resources are stretched thin rebuilding Westeros. Essos must wait unless it involves the welfare of my people here." He bowed again, only mildly abashed. "As you command, my queen." That evening, Daenerys retreated to her chambers, bone-tired. She felt the weight of countless decisions grinding her down. Yet she also felt a measure of pride. In the past, she might have unleashed her dragons on the Iron Islands in a fiery wrath, caring little for the innocent or guilty. Now, she was learning the slow path of measured justice, and though it pained her to watch men die, she believed it necessary to maintain order. Melisandre visited her late, as was her habit. The Red Priestess found Daenerys seated by the fireplace where embers glowed. No words were exchanged at first. Melisandre simply knelt near the hearth, stirring the coals with a small iron rod. Sparks lifted in a bright swirl, reflecting in the ruby at her throat. At length she said softly, "You have grown in wisdom, Your Grace. The fires flicker with the echoes of your choices. Each one shapes the realm more than any prophecy could." Daenerys leaned back in her chair, eyelids heavy. "Was I wise today, Melisandre? Was it wisdom to order the beheading of those reavers? Or was it simply violence under the guise of justice?" Melisandre turned, her face solemn. "Justice must sometimes take violent form. Yet you did not revel in it. You did not torture or humiliate. In olden times, kings and queens might burn them alive for spectacle. Your mercy was in your restraint." Daenerys let out a quiet sigh. "It does not feel merciful. But I see your point. At least I am not my father, nor am I some slaver who uses cruelty as entertainment." Melisandre's eyes gleamed. "That difference is profound. You hold to your convictions even when they bring you anguish. That is why I believe you truly are the one the flames spoke of, the one who can unite and heal, not merely conquer." Daenerys nodded slowly, letting the warmth of the fire lull her. She gazed at Melisandre and saw a reflection of her own weariness in the priestess's posture. They had both walked a long road to get here, driven by faith in the flame or in one's birthright. Now they stood on the precipice of a realm that might finally know peace, if only they could keep the hungry jaws of ambition at bay. She remembered the day she had first met Melisandre in Meereen, uncertain whether to trust this red-robed sorceress who spoke of prophecies and a chosen one. How the world had turned since then. They had faced the dead, stood triumphant, and now labored to plant the seeds of a new era. And though many battles of hearts, of politics, of inevitable challenges remained, they would face them together. Daenerys closed her eyes and let the crackle of the embers fill her ears. She was tired, but the day was done. Outside, the city lights flickered and the realm breathed in uneasy harmony. She felt Melisandre's hand gently cover her own, a gesture of quiet solidarity, and she allowed herself, for just a moment, to rest in that warmth, remembering that even queens needed the solace of human connection. Tomorrow would bring new trials and triumphs. For now, the flame burned steady and bright, and Daenerys allowed herself to hope that perhaps, after all, this victory could last. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Daenerys's private solar, illuminating motes of dust in the air and casting pale rectangles on the polished floor. The hush of early day wrapped the Red Keep in a delicate stillness. Servants had just begun their rounds, guards on the walls adjusted their stiff postures, and the city below stretched its limbs after another night. Daenerys Targaryen sat at a broad table strewn with parchments, a steaming cup of tea at her elbow. She wore a simple gown of dark cloth trimmed with subtle gold embroidery, her hair braided in a practical style that reflected the morning's businesslike mood. She studied several letters arrayed before her, each bearing the seal of a different region in Westeros. Some promised cooperation, others begged for relief from hardships, and one or two bristled with veiled complaints. Her eyes lingered on a newly arrived missive from Lord Gawain Westerling. News of further skirmishes in the western seas had yet to materialize, which was a relief. After Dario's decisive action, the Ironborn seemed quieter. Still, she could not be complacent. Euron Greyjoy's whereabouts remained unknown, and rumors of him drifted into the capital like ghost stories, always contradictory. A soft knock sounded at the door. Daenerys set her quill aside and called for whomever it was to enter. The door opened, revealing Melisandre, who dipped her head in gentle greeting. "Your Grace," Melisandre said, stepping forward. The faint lines of fatigue beneath her eyes suggested she had been up late organizing the endless flow of communications. "I've brought the latest reports from the north. Also, Lord Royce's courier arrived an hour ago and awaits your pleasure." Daenerys allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you, Melisandre. Let the courier know I'll receive him shortly in the hall. But first, tell me of the north." Melisandre approached, placing a short stack of parchments on the table. "Lord Jon Snow sends word that winter storms have eased somewhat. Some roads are opening. He acknowledges and appreciates the shipments of grain, says the worst of the famine has been averted, though many still struggle. Rebuilding continues at Winterfell with new living quarters for families displaced by the war. He has also hosted a delegation from the Night's Watch who confirmed that the threat beyond the wall is gone." She paused, letting the significance of that rest between them. "The Watch remains to guard against wildling incursions and any unforeseen dangers, but the living dead have vanished with their king." Daenerys exhaled gently, a grateful warmth surfacing at the memory of that desperate battle in the snow. "I'm relieved. It's good to know the North recovers. Perhaps in time they'll even find prosperity. Once the roads are truly passable, I'll consider traveling there again, if only to ensure our alliance is strengthened." Melisandre nodded, though a fleeting concern crossed her face. "Travel is always a risk, Your Grace. Some whisper that you should never leave King's Landing, lest old rivals seize the opportunity." Daenerys pressed her lips. "I understand their fears, but I cannot rule from a single tower. I owe it to all Westeros to be more than a distant queen. We'll make plans when the moment is right." She handed the northern letters back to Melisandre. Then she rose, smoothing the folds of her gown, and they walked together into the corridor. A pair of unsullied guards stationed at the Solar's doors snapped to attention. Daenerys's footfalls resounded on the stone floors, accompanied by Melisandre's lighter steps. They passed through a small courtyard where orange trees grew in large stone planters recently brought from Dorne to add a touch of color. The crisp air carried the faint tang of salt from Blackwater Bay. When they reached the audience hall, a more intimate chamber than the grand throne room, they found a handful of courtiers and 2 gold cloaks waiting. Standing among them was the courier from the Vale, a gaunt man in travel-stained cloak, who bowed deeply as she entered. She bid him rise and speak. He cleared his throat. "Your Grace, I bear tidings from Lord Royce of the Vale. He regrets to inform you that certain mountain clans near the Bloody Gate have grown restless, raiding travelers again. They've proven difficult to contain. Lord Royce seeks your guidance or your support in quelling these bandits." Daenerys considered, remembering how Tyrion once spoke of these clans, proud, fierce, hard to control. She also recalled that the Vale had largely escaped the worst ravages of the recent wars. Their stores of food and their mountainous fortresses kept them relatively safe. "Has Lord Royce sent men of his own to negotiate or defend?" "He has, Your Grace," the courier replied, "but the clans retreat into rocky passes or hidden caverns. The Vale's knights find it difficult to give full chase without risking heavy losses, and the clans refuse all attempts at peaceful terms." Daenerys glanced at Melisandre, silently conferring. Then she asked, is Lord Royce requesting additional forces from the crown, or does he merely seek my leave to conduct a more forceful campaign? The courier shifted uneasily. He states that if a small detachment of disciplined troops like your Unsullied were available, it might help subdue the clans swiftly with minimal bloodshed. He also wonders if you might dispatch an envoy skilled in mediation, as the clans once respected a certain arrangement with Lord John Arryn in days past. Daenerys's mind raced. She wanted to avoid turning every local conflict into a direct intervention by the royal forces, but the Vale was an important ally. The mountain clans were known for their stubborn independence, yet if they threatened travelers in large numbers, something had to be done. Very well, she said. Tell Lord Royce I will consider sending a small contingent of Unsullied, led by a commander I trust, to assist. I will also select an envoy to treat with the clans if such a conversation can be had. If the clans yield, I prefer a negotiated peace. If not, they must face the consequences of harassing the Vale's roads. The courier bowed again. Thank you, Your Grace. I will deliver your words without delay. He withdrew, guided by a gold cloak, leaving Daenerys with Melisandre and a few watchful courtiers. She let out a pensive breath. It seemed that no corner of Westeros was free from friction. Even now, with the memory of the undead invasion so fresh, local feuds persisted. As she dismissed the others, Tyrion approached from a side chamber, wearing a thoughtful expression. I overheard, he said, inclining his head politely. The Vale's mountain clans. They can be a nuisance, but if properly handled, they might be less trouble than the Ironborn. Do you truly mean to send Unsullied up the mountain passes? Daenerys turned to walk with him into an adjoining corridor, Melisandre trailing a few steps behind. Perhaps a small force, yes, but not too large. I don't want the Vale's knights to think I'm usurping their territory. A token show of strength might suffice, especially if we can get the clans to the bargaining table. Tyrion nodded, brow furrowed in concentration. I could recommend a man named Ricardo, one of your blood riders from your Dothraki forces. He's proven adept at small unit tactics, oddly enough, from the time he spent with the Unsullied in Slaver's Bay. Not quite the Vale style, but he might be flexible enough to handle those mountain passes. She considered. Ricardo is loyal. Good. I'll speak with him. As for the envoy, perhaps Ser Davos? He's been in the north these many months, but I've heard he's returned recently to help with shipping improvements in the Crownlands. He's a reasonable man, skilled at talking sense into stubborn folk. Tyrion arched a brow. He'd do well, though you might recall he harbors some distrust toward me and toward certain red priestesses. Still, he's a good man. If you can persuade him, he'll treat with the clans fairly. Daenerys exhaled. I will do what I must. Every time I address one flare-up, another arises elsewhere, like small fires dotted across the realm. Tyrion gave a sympathetic smile. That is the nature of rule, but you're handling it better than most. They parted ways soon after. Daenerys made her way through the castle to an open-air balcony that overlooked King's Landing. The city's roofs glinted under the wan sun. She leaned against the stone rail, letting her gaze wander across the sprawl of life. Somewhere in those streets, merchants bartered, smiths hammered iron, children ran about squealing. She could smell cooking fires and the faint stench of the canal that led to the Blackwater. It was not an elegant city, nor a particularly clean one, but it was hers now. She felt a pang of conflicting emotions, pride and responsibility, hope and weariness. A light scuff of boots on stone alerted her to someone's approach. She turned to see Melisandre, her red robes rustling in the breeze. The priestess lowered her head in a respectful bow. Forgive my intrusion, Your Grace, but I sensed you might wish for counsel. Daenerys forced a wry smile. You sensed my frustration, perhaps? Yes, another day, another set of demands. The Vale's mountain clans, the potential reemergence of Ironborn raids, the scarcities in the Riverlands. Some days it feels endless. Melisandre stepped to the railing, looking out at the city with her. The wind caught strands of her red hair, and the ruby at her throat seemed to shimmer faintly in the daylight. The burdens of the living are never truly lifted, but you shoulder them because you care. Remember that is what sets you apart. You wish to protect the realm, not exploit it. Daenerys nodded. I do, but I also worry about losing myself in this. Every time I order a company of Unsullied to quell raiders or pass sentence on criminals, I wonder, am I using the might of the throne for good, or am I simply imposing my will on those who might see themselves as free folk? Melisandre's gaze softened. They say the line between justice and tyranny is thin. You've walked it carefully so far. As long as you remain true to your guiding principle that power is meant to uplift, not crush, you will not fall into darkness. Daenerys studied the priestess in silence for a moment, recalling how Melisandre had once pinned all her hopes on Stannis Baratheon. Now she served Daenerys with a measured humility that suggested lessons learned. "Thank you," Daenerys said quietly, letting the sincerity show in her voice. "Sometimes I need the reminder that I'm not alone in this." Melisandre inclined her head. "You're never alone. The Lord of Light watches over you, and you have allies willing to speak truth, even when it stings. Tyrion, Ser Barristan, Missandei, even Ser Davos. They won't let you stray from your path." Daenerys fell silent again, letting the breeze ruffle her hair. Far below, she saw people crossing the plaza, no bigger than specks. "How goes your own work?" she asked at length. "The temple, the faithful, are they content?" Melisandre's lips curved slightly. "They do well. We provide meals, healing, and guidance for those who come. In truth, it has become more a place of charity than of strict worship. Perhaps that is how it should be. The flame is open to all, and if it warms those who are cold and hungry, I believe Lawler is pleased." A quiet sense of relief washed through Daenerys. "I'm glad. We can't afford fanaticism in this realm. Too many scars from old conflicts." Melisandre bowed her head, the sunlight striking her hair with a copper glow. "I have seen enough of fanaticism to know it yields only suffering." Then she turned her gaze outward as if searching the far horizon. "I occasionally look into the flames to see what might be lurking beyond our knowledge. Lately, they show me little but scattered shapes. Shadows of restless spirits, fleeting glimpses of a golden-faced queen in a distant land, illusions that could be metaphor, not reality. I suspect the realm's greatest dangers no longer come from the undead or monstrous foes, but from our own mortal failings, greed, pride, vengeance." Daenerys's jaw tightened. "That is the war we still fight. I have no illusions that all will yield to reason." She tapped a hand absently on the warm stone ledge. "But I'll face it, day by day." They parted shortly after, each returning to their respective tasks. Daenerys descended the steps toward the ground-level courtyard, where she found a small gathering of Unsullied practicing spear drills. Grey Worm had once led them, but he had chosen to remain in Noth to protect Missandei's homeland from slavers, fulfilling a promise they made after the Great War. Now a new commander, a quiet but resolute man named Janah, carried out the daily training. Janah saluted as Daenerys approached. "Your Grace," he said, voice mild but respectful. The ring of steel on steel echoed as the Unsullied completed a formation exercise. "We stand ready to execute your commands." Daenerys nodded. "I trust the men are well? No difficulties in the city?" Janah's gaze flicked to the practicing soldiers. "All is well, though some resent the occasional insults hurled by certain lords' retainers. The men ignore it as always. They know discipline is paramount." She felt a surge of protectiveness. "If any lord's men harass the Unsullied, they will answer to me. Make sure that is understood." Janah inclined his head. "We shall, Your Grace." She explained the situation in the Vale, asking him to prepare a small detachment, no more than 30, skilled in scouting. She also requested that Ricardo be informed she wished to speak with him. Janah bowed again, promising to relay the command at once. Daenerys lingered a moment, watching the Unsullied move in perfect synchronicity. Their discipline always amazed her, a testament to the resilience of these warriors who had once been slaves. Now they were free men choosing to follow her. She prayed she would never betray that trust. In the days that followed, events moved swiftly. Ser Davos, upon hearing Daenerys' request, traveled from the ports along Crackclaw Point back to King's Landing. She granted him a private audience, explaining her hopes for a peaceful resolution with the Vale's mountain clans. He listened intently, rubbing his salt and pepper beard, his gaze thoughtful. Though he had long served Stannis and then Jon Snow, he now recognized Daenerys' authority. And if anyone could negotiate with stubborn folk, it was the man once known as the Onion Knight. "It's not so different from dealing with northern clans," Ser Davos mused. They respect strength but also fairness. If I can talk to their chiefs, I might remind them that the White Walkers are gone, but that if we keep fighting amongst ourselves, we'll only invite more tragedy." He paused, eyes flicking over Daenerys' calm expression. "I've no illusions, Your Grace. These are men who've likely grown up raiding. They may not bow easily." "I don't need them to bow," Daenerys replied firmly. "I only need them to stop attacking the Vale's roads. If they have grievances, let them speak them, and perhaps we can forge an understanding." Ser Davos inclined his head. "I'll do my best. If they won't listen, well, I suppose that's where the Unsullied come in." She nodded, relief mingling with a cautious awareness. "Yes. Good luck, Ser Davos. Return safely." With that settled, she sent off the detachment under Ricaro's command. They rode north with Ser Davos, planning to meet Lord Royce at the Bloody Gate. Daenerys received a polite letter from Royce soon after, thanking her. He vowed that the Vale would never forget this royal support. Meanwhile, tensions across the sea had begun to demand attention as well. A messenger from Pentos arrived, seeking an audience. He wore silken robes and a ring on each finger, presenting himself as an emissary of Illyrio Mopatis, an old name that stirred memories of Daenerys' earliest days as an exile. She received the messenger in the presence of Tyrion and Melisandre, curious what Illyrio wanted. The messenger bowed low, then spoke in the slightly accented common tongue of Essos. "My master, Magister Mopatis, sends greetings to Her Grace, Daenerys of House Targaryen. He wishes to renew old alliances. He believes that with peace in Westeros, trade between Pentos and King's Landing could be profitable. He also extends a personal invitation for you to visit Pentos at your convenience, that you might share recollections of days gone by." Daenerys regarded him coolly. She remembered how Illyrio had once sheltered her and Viserys, arranging her marriage to Khal Drogo in exchange for potential future gains. She felt a flicker of nostalgia mixed with wariness. "I am grateful for Magister Mopatis' hospitality in the past," she said. "But I have responsibilities here. I cannot simply sail to Pentos. If he wishes to establish trade, we can negotiate through envoys." The messenger bowed again, oily smile never fading. "As you wish, Your Grace. My master merely expresses his fondness for the Targaryen cause. He stands ready to assist if you desire further support, gold, ships, or more." Tyrion flicked a glance at Daenerys. She answered carefully, "I am always open to favorable trade agreements, but I do not need gold or ships from Pentos at present. As for old friendships, let us say I remember who helped me and who saw me as a means to an end." She paused, letting the messenger stew slightly. "Inform your master that I appreciate the offer and will keep it in mind." The Pentoshi bowed yet again, performed the usual pleasantries, and took his leave. Once he was gone, Tyrion let out a low chuckle. Illyrio Mopatis always did have a sense for which way the wind blows. Now that you rule in truth, he's seeking to rekindle that relationship. Daenerys tapped a finger on the arm of her chair. "I won't be ungrateful for what he did, but I also know he profited handsomely from aligning with House Targaryen. I won't be manipulated. If trade benefits both realms, we'll do it. But I won't entangle Westeros in his politics." Melisandre nodded in agreement. "Essos can be complicated, Your Grace. Many of the free cities remain reliant on slavery, even if they call it by other names. You ended it in Slaver's Bay, but places like Volantis continue the practice." Daenerys' expression turned steely at the mention of slavery. "I know. If I had the strength, I'd free them all. But Westeros is my primary charge now, and my forces are already spread thin maintaining order. Someday, perhaps, if I can strengthen this realm enough, we can influence Essos through trade and diplomacy. One step at a time." She rose, her mood grim. The mention of slavery always stirred her deepest convictions. She remembered the pits of Meereen, the chains, the smell of blood on hot sand. How far she had come from that place. And yet the world's cruelty remained persistent, flaring up wherever it found opportunity. Soon after, as the day wore on, she received word that Yara Greyjoy had arrived at Dragonstone, requesting a brief audience to discuss the Iron Islands. Daenerys decided to fly out on Drogon, taking advantage of the short distance across Blackwater Bay to the fortress that had once been Stannis' seat, and before that, the ancestral stronghold of House Targaryen. She had not visited in some months, leaving a garrison behind to watch over the castle. Now, a swirl of anticipation filled her as she ascended into the sky, Drogon's massive wings stirring the air into gusts that rattled banners along the Red Keep's battlements. The flight did not take long. The sea stretched below like a rippled sheet of dark steel, and she felt the wind whip her braided hair behind her. Drogon seemed to relish the open air after days perched in or near King's Landing. When Dragonstone's familiar black silhouette came into view, Daenerys urged Drogon lower until he landed in the outer courtyard, scattering a few startled guards. She slid down expertly, patting his scaled flank before ordering him to rest on a rocky outcrop near the castle walls. Yara was waiting, dressed in plain but sturdy leathers. Her dark hair, cut short, framed a face set with determination. She saluted Daenerys in a gesture of respect. "Your Grace, it's good to see you in person." Daenerys inclined her head. "And you, Yara Greyjoy, you've come to speak of the islands." "Yes." Yara's voice held a contained urgency. "The situation is precarious. With Euron's disappearance, many lesser captains scramble to fill the vacuum. Some have accepted me as the rightful ruler of the Iron Islands in your name, but others still cling to old ways or dream of raiding. I've done what I can to keep them in line, but rumors persist that Euron might return. Fear of him keeps some from pledging wholeheartedly to me or to you." Daenerys studied Yara's expression. The Ironborn woman had always shown unwavering loyalty since their alliance against Euron. She had hoped to bring the Iron Islands out of the reaving tradition, offering them a future built on trade and fishing. But changing an entire culture's mindset was no small feat. "Do you believe Euron still lives?" Daenerys asked. Yara exhaled, frustration etched in her posture. "I can't be certain. He hasn't shown his face, not since his defeat at sea. But there are half a dozen captains who swear they've received signals from him or found runic tokens in hidden coves. Might be superstition or might be real. Regardless, the threat of his return keeps them restless. Some have begun smaller raids on neighboring coasts, defying my orders." Daenerys set her jaw. "We've seen the result. My forces had to chase them. The Reavers were punished, but the risk remains." Yara nodded gravely. "Exactly. I try to hold them in check, but the Iron Islands are scattered. I can't be everywhere at once, and the men who resent me exploit that. We need a firmer hand to end this once and for all. If Euron is out there, I want to find him and ensure he never rises again." For a moment, Daenerys recalled her time among the Dothraki, how she had had to unite them through a bold display of power. The Ironborn might require something equally unyielding. "If you believe a show of strength would help, I can spare another portion of the royal fleet to stand with you, provided we coordinate so as not to weaken the rest of Westeros's coasts." Yara's gray eyes sparked with hope. "It might be enough. A combined presence near Pike, ensuring no renegade ships slip in or out without challenge, could stifle these would-be Reavers. And if Euron does appear, we confront him together." Daenerys considered, walking across the courtyard. The basalt walls of Dragonstone loomed overhead, carved into ancient shapes of dragons. A cold wind tugged at her cloak. "I'll speak with Admiral Belrio," she said at last. "He's done well securing the Crownlands. I can reassign some ships to your command, but I want minimal collateral damage. Burn only those who insist on raiding." Yara smirked, though not unkindly. "You've my word, Your Grace. If they yield, they'll be spared. But if they won't, the Ironborn Code says they deserve what they get." Daenerys halted and turned to face Yara squarely. "One more thing. I want you to continue working toward a new way of life there, no more reaving as the default. I know that's not easily done, but we agreed that the islands could thrive on honest trade if they had royal support. I don't want to be known as the queen who allowed the Ironborn to revert to their old ways." Yara squared her shoulders. "I haven't forgotten. My father tried to cling to the old ways. It brought only war and death. I want something better for my people. It's just slow going, but I'll keep at it." Daenerys nodded, a flicker of admiration lighting her features. "Good. We proceed then." They spent the afternoon in Dragonstone's strategy room, a chamber overshadowed by the carved table that depicted Westeros in miniature. Once, Stannis had brooded here while Melisandre spoke of visions in the flames. Now, Daenerys traced shipping routes with Yara, planning how best to patrol the waters around Pike. They identified a few strong points that might serve as watch stations for the Crown's fleet, ensuring coverage across the western seas. By dusk, the plan had taken shape. Yara would return to the Iron Islands with half a dozen royal war galleys, blockading any suspected Reaver hideouts. If word came of Euron, they would converge swiftly, scuttling his vessels or capturing them if possible. Before Daenerys departed, she walked along Dragonstone's ramparts, revisiting old memories of a bleaker time. She had arrived here first after crossing from Essos, full of zeal to claim the Iron Throne. So much had changed. She had gained allies, lost dear ones, fought a war against the dead. Now she was a queen in truth, faced with the complexities of governance that no vision of conquest could have prepared her for. Drogon soared overhead, a reminder of her enduring power. She watched Yara stride across the courtyard toward the docks, purposeful as ever. The Ironborn woman had found her own sense of honor in the midst of a violent culture. Daenerys respected that. She turned to find Melisandre on the wall, gazing at the reddening sky. The priestess had accompanied her on Drogon's back as quietly as a shadow. "You remain thoughtful, your grace," Melisandre said without preamble, voice a low murmur beneath the wind. Daenerys came alongside her. "Dragonstone stirs memories. I once thought Stannis Baratheon was my greatest obstacle and the Lannisters after him. Then I discovered the White Walkers. Now all those foes are gone, replaced by smaller threats, but threats all the same. It never ends." Melisandre's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "Life rarely grants us perfect peace. The eternal dance between light and shadow, mercy and wrath, this is the world we inhabit. But you shape it as best you can." Daenerys nodded, pulling her cloak closer. The sea wind bit at her cheeks. "I do. Let us hope it's enough. Come, let us return to King's Landing before night fully falls." They descended the steps to where Drogon awaited, his black scales glimmering in the dying light. Daenerys climbed onto his back, Melisandre clinging behind her, and with a powerful leap and a thunderous beat of wings, Drogon took flight. Dragonstone shrank behind them, its towers silhouetted against the crimson sky. They soared across the bay, the chill air rushing around them until the fires of King's Landing came into view. Touching down in the Red Keep's courtyard, Daenerys dismounted gracefully, smoothing her hair. A hush fell among the nearby guards as they watched their queen return by dragon. She felt the usual mix of pride and caution. The people saw her as a figure of near-mythic power, but she was acutely aware of the responsibilities that power demanded. She thanked Melisandre for accompanying her, then retired to her solar to find Tyrion waiting with a new stack of papers. He offered a sympathetic grimace. "I suspect your flight was more exhilarating than what I have for you, but certain matters need your signature. Also, we've had an interesting development. A Sellsword company from Essos arrived at the city gates this afternoon, claiming they wish to pledge themselves to you. They call themselves the Basilisk's Tooth." Daenerys's brow furrowed. "Another Sellsword company? We've hardly the coin or the need. Why do they come now?" Tyrion shrugged, rummaging among the parchment. "They claim they once served the Golden Company but splintered off. They heard you rule with honor and want to enter your service. Might be they think you'll pay them well or grant them lands. Or maybe they're just mercenaries testing an opportunity." She sank into a chair, mind-whirling. "We can't have every band of swords crossing the sea to loiter around the capital. I have enough to handle without an influx of foreign soldiers. Still, if we turn them away, they might cause trouble. I'll see them, but keep them at arm's length." Tyrion dipped his head. "As you wish. I'll arrange a brief audience tomorrow." She sighed. One more item on the list. "Thank you, Tyrion." He gave her a small, empathetic smile. "I serve at your pleasure. Best get some rest, though. You've been flying about all day, and tomorrow promises to be no less busy." With that, he left her to the stack of documents. She read through them mechanically. Petitions for funds to repair a fortress in the Riverlands, a letter from the Citadel requesting permission for a new library annex in King's Landing, an outline of new trade tariffs proposed by the Master of Coin. Each needed her judgment. By the time she finished, her eyes felt gritty with exhaustion. She managed a small meal, then retired, letting her ladies help her out of the heavier garments before collapsing onto her bed. Sleep came swiftly, filled with half-remembered dreams of flying over an endless sea. The next morning, the Sellsword audience took place in the smaller throne room that Daenerys used for more mundane court matters. The company's representatives were a motley trio, a tall man with a shaved head and elaborate tattoos swirling down his neck, a woman with short dark hair and a patch over one eye, and a wiry figure who wore a wide grin that never reached his eyes. They bowed with theatrical flourish. Daenerys, seated on a simple wooden chair rather than the Iron Throne, gestured for them to speak. The tall man announced himself as Alok, captain of the Basilisk's Tooth. He spoke with a thick accent reminiscent of the eastern coasts of Sithorios. "Your Grace, we bring you our blades. We once served in the Golden Company but found them too rigid. We prefer an employer with vision. We heard you were that queen." Daenerys let her gaze flick between the three, reading their stances. They were confident, perhaps a bit too much so. I do not recall requesting Cell's words, she said, voice calm. Nor am I short on defenders. Why should I pay coin for your services? The woman with the eye patch spoke up, her voice husky. Because we are skilled in tasks conventional armies find inconvenient. Tracking down brigands, securing distant outposts, handling espionage. We adapt. Tyrion, standing to one side, interjected, we already have men for such tasks, though. What do you bring that's unique? Alok's tattooed neck shifted as he turned to Tyrion. We're not men of Westeros. We have no ties here, no loyalties except to our employer. No chance we'll be swayed by local lords offering bribes. We fight for gold, and once we take a contract, we see it through. We've done so in Karth, Volantis, even the Basilisk Isles themselves. Daenerys leaned forward, considering. So you're offering your neutrality in local feuds. That's not nothing. Still, I have no intention of waging more wars. The realm needs peace. What would I do with a roving band of foreign cells words? The wiry man with the perpetual grin spoke, voice lilting, even in peace, there is the matter of banditry, rebellious whispers, duties your armies may be too large or too conspicuous to handle efficiently. My queen, we can be subtle. Your gold cloaks look after the city, but beyond the walls, in the cracks, trouble can fester. Daenerys pressed her lips into a thin line. She did not like the idea of employing mercenaries for covert tasks. It reminded her of the old ways of cunning lords who had turned Cell's words on peasants to quell dissent. She would not become that kind of ruler. I appreciate your pitch, Captain Ulok, she said carefully, but I'm not in the habit of paying for violence I do not need. If you wish to remain in Westeros, you must abide by my laws. If your men cause trouble, they will be dealt with. If you wish to offer your services as a normal free company, perhaps you might speak with local lords who require extra guards. But I have no special need for your subtlety. A flicker of disappointment crossed the three Sellswords' faces. Yet Ulok managed a polite nod. Very well, Your Grace. If you change your mind, we remain at your disposal. We will keep to your laws, earn coin honestly. But know that should you require a discreet solution, the basilisk's tooth is unmatched. She inclined her head, dismissing them. They bowed and exited with measured grace, though the tension in their posture suggested frustration. When they were gone, Tyrion muttered, I'm sure they expected to enthrall you with talk of covert work. A wise move, not jumping at it. We should keep an eye on them, though. Daenerys nodded. Yes, have the gold cloaks watch them discreetly. If they break the peace, we'll cast them out. If they truly wish honest employment, some lord might hire them. But I won't become the queen who unleashes mercenaries on her own people. A brief hush followed, broken by the arrival of a steward who announced that Ser Jorah Mormont, another friend from her past, had sent a letter from Bear Island. Surprised, Daenerys accepted the parchment at once, scanning its contents. Jorah had gone north long ago, seeking to help Jon Snow rebuild the battered northern lands. She had not heard from him in quite some time. She read the letter silently. Jorah reported that Bear Island's small folk were recovering from the harsh winter, though they still mourned the fallen Lady Lyanna Mormont, who had died heroically against the undead. The islanders were proud, determined to stand tall. Jorah expressed his hope that Daenerys was well, and that if ever she needed counsel from someone who had walked the path of redemption, he was at her service. The letter ended with formal well wishes, though Daenerys sensed the warmth beneath the courtesy. She lowered it slowly, feeling a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Jorah had once betrayed her, only to redeem himself by unwavering loyalty. She was glad he had found a place in the north, among his kin. Still, a small part of her missed his stalwart presence at her side. She tucked the letter away carefully and resumed her duties. As the day progressed, more minor petitions came and went. Daenerys managed them with measured resolve, occasionally conferring with Tyrion or Melisandre. By afternoon, she retreated to her chambers for a brief respite, only to find Melisandre waiting there, standing by the fireplace with a pensive look. The priestess turned when Daenerys entered, bowing her head. Your Grace, she said softly, I have received word from our temple in the city. One of the acolytes claims to have had a vision in the flames, something about a serpent crossing the sea, bringing ruin. The acolyte was frightened and uncertain. Daenerys's brow knitted. A serpent crossing the sea? That could be anything. A metaphor for Euron Greyjoy or some other foe. Or it might be meaningless. Melisandre's red hair caught the light as she inclined her head. Indeed, visions can be cryptic, but I wanted you to be aware. The acolyte insists it was no small dream that the flames showed them your face and a great serpent behind you, darkening the sky. I tried to interpret, but the images were jumbled. Daenerys shivered slightly, crossing to the window where sunlight streamed in. I'll keep it in mind. I can't base decisions on half-formed prophecy. If a threat does come from across the sea, we'll face it. Melisandre regarded her with solemn eyes. I agree, prophecy must guide rather than command us. We remain vigilant. A knock sounded on the chamber door and Missandei's voice drifted through. Your Grace, I beg pardon, but Lord Gendry Baratheon seeks a word if you are free. Daenerys cast a questioning glance at Melisandre, who only offered a polite step back. The queen called for Missandei to let him in. A moment later, Gendry entered, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a doublet with the stag sigil. His face bore a seriousness that hinted at urgent matters. He bowed. Your Grace, sorry to intrude. I've come from the Stormlands with news. A group of outlaws has made camp in the ruins of Summerhall, or so my scouts say. They've been waylaying travelers on the Rose Road, claiming to speak for the rightful Baratheon heir. Daenerys' lips tightened. And they're obviously not referring to you, Lord Gendry? Gendry shook his head. No, Your Grace. They speak of some black-bearded pretender who calls himself Armand Baratheon, though no one's heard of him. Likely an up-jumped brigand using an old name to rally discontents. Daenerys exchanged a look with Melisandre. The serpent across the sea? Perhaps unrelated, but trouble nonetheless. Have they harmed anyone? At least 3 travelers found dead, robbed of their coin. They threaten local farmers, demanding tribute. Daenerys took a slow breath. Then we must put an end to it. Summerhall was once a royal retreat. It's an insult that outlaws squat there, terrorizing the roads. I will send a message to the commander of the Storm's End garrison. He can dispatch men to flush them out. Gendry nodded, relief in his posture. Thank you, Your Grace. I wanted to handle it myself, but with my limited retinue, it would be risky. A larger force might scatter them at once. She affirmed her decision and dismissed him with gratitude for bringing the matter to her attention. Once he was gone, Daenerys let out a weary sound. Another day, another rising band of outlaws. Melisandre approached softly. When a realm shifts from war to peace, opportunists crawl from the shadows. Yet each time you intervene, you reinforce the idea that the crown defends the common folk. Daenerys gave a small nod. Yes, that is what I want. But it sometimes feels like trying to hold back a tide with a single hand. Melisandre's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. You are stronger than you know. And not alone. That evening, the Great Hall played host to a modest gathering of lords, knights, and envoys to celebrate a new treaty with Dorne, one that solidified water-sharing agreements between the Dornish and the Stormlands. It was a small victory, but a meaningful step toward healing rifts that had been exacerbated by the wars. Musicians played a gentle melody, the wine flowed, and Daenerys took a seat at the high table, graciously greeting each guest who approached. She spotted Gendry conversing with a Dornish lady and Tyrion sharing a wry exchange with one of the Reach's envoys. Amid the swirl of conversation, Daenerys glimpsed Daario across the hall, leaning against a pillar. His attire was half Westerosi, half Essosi flamboyance, and he cut a confident figure. Their eyes met, and he offered a small nod as though acknowledging that he still stood ready for her command. In some ways, he remained the dashing Sells-Word who had once pledged himself to her in Meereen. Yet she sensed a subdued element in him now. Perhaps he had come to terms with the reality that she would never again be the woman who rode off with him alone, forging reckless adventures. She offered him a polite nod in return, then turned her attention back to the line of lords awaiting a word with her. When the feast concluded, Daenerys rose to deliver a short speech, thanking the Dornish envoys for their cooperation and expressing her hope that all the kingdoms might find similar ways to reconcile their interests. Polite applause followed. She withdrew from the dais, accompanied by Missandei, weaving through the crowd. On her way out, she paused in a quieter alcove behind a marble column, allowing herself a moment to breathe. The day's demands weighed on her shoulders like a cloak of iron. She pressed a hand to her forehead, half wishing she could vanish into the night air for a few hours without an entourage. But that was not an option. Duties, petitions, alliances, troubles, they all clamored for her attention. She sensed someone approach, boots echoing on the polished floor. Expecting Tyrion or another advisor, she turned, but found Ser Barristan Selmy instead. The old knight bowed. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. She offered a faint smile. Ser Barristan, no apology needed. I haven't seen you all evening. He inclined his head respectfully. I've been observing from the sidelines, making sure the hall remains secure. I wanted to speak with you about a matter of the King's Guard, or Queen's Guard, as we name it now. We have an open position, and I believe you should consider filling it soon." Daenerys' gaze flicked aside. She'd lost a number of loyal knights in the wars, and she had yet to appoint replacements to some offices. "Yes, I recall. Who do you suggest?" "There is a knight from the Crownlands, Sir Jason Bywater, who fought bravely at Winterfell. He's young but has a strong sense of honor by all accounts. I can bring him before you for evaluation if you wish." She nodded. "Yes, do so. I'll speak with him personally. Our Queen's Guard must be the best of the best, morally and skillfully." Barristan's weathered face crinkled in a small smile. "I expected no less, Your Grace." "Thank you." He withdrew, and she found herself alone again, save for Melisandre, who hovered at a discreet distance, ever watchful. Daenerys let out a small breath, willing herself to stay composed. That night, she sat by her fireplace before retiring. The coals glowed red, and she thought of all the burdens she had taken upon herself. She had banished the Night King, ended the tyranny of Cersei Lannister, and set the realm on a course toward healing. Yet the day-to-day intricacies of ruling wore her down more than any single battle. The candle flame danced on the table beside her, and she recalled the stories of her ancestors. Some had thrived in peacetime, forging lasting dynasties, while others had crumbled under paranoia or incompetence. She silently vowed she would not be counted among the latter. She was not alone. Tyrion, Melisandre, Barristan, Davos, Yara, so many others stood with her. And Melisandre, always near, a calm presence that offered spiritual reassurance. Still, the path was hers to walk. She closed her eyes, letting the hum of the city below lull her. Tomorrow, more tasks awaited. The realm churned with small storms, but also glimmers of promise. The Vale's mountain clans might come to reason, the Iron Islands could quell their reavers, the Crownlands might see a revival of farmland, and the people of King's Landing might begin to trust that their queen would protect them. Day by day, EP by careful step, she would guide Westeros away from the lingering shadows of war and into something brighter. When morning arrived, Daenerys woke with renewed determination. She spent the early hours hearing petitions in a smaller council chamber, traders seeking licenses, local disputes requiring a royal verdict. One merchant from the Westerlands complained about high tariffs. She negotiated them downward slightly but insisted on certain quality standards. Another petitioner, a blacksmith from the city, asked for a royal grant to expand his workshop in exchange for forging new plow blades for local farms. She approved, seeing it as an investment in agriculture. In the midst of these humdrum affairs, a surprising visitor was announced, Sansa Stark. The red-haired lady of Winterfell had traveled south again, apparently unannounced, and now waited in the courtyard. Daenerys' pulse quickened. She had last seen Sansa after the Great War, when the Northern Lords had pledged loyalty. Their relationship had been cordial but reserved. She quickly concluded her current hearing and rose, instructing Melisandre to escort Lady Stark to a private receiving room. Sansa arrived wearing a cloak of wolf gray lined with white fur, her copper hair braided neatly. She offered a formal curtsy. "Your Grace." Daenerys responded with a polite inclination of her head. "Lady Sansa, this is an unexpected pleasure. What brings you to King's Landing?" Sansa straightened, calm and composed. "I come with news and a request. The North stands behind you as we promised, but I've learned of certain difficulties near the Gift, bands of brigands harassing small villages. We suspect they might be deserters from either the war or roving outlaws who fled the south. Jon wanted me to inform you personally in case these outlaws are part of a wider problem crossing the realm." Daenerys frowned. "Brigands again? It seems the land is littered with them. What does Jon propose?" "He's dispatched a small force of his own men to handle it, but he wished you to know in case you had intelligence of movements from the south." Sansa clasped her hands. "In addition, I wanted to discuss an idea about trade routes. The northern ports, like White Harbor, are opening up. We could send more goods south if we had better roads through the neck. We'd need the Crown's support to rebuild those causeways, perhaps with stone and timber from the Riverlands or the Vale. I believe it would benefit the entire realm. More northern produce, especially game and fish, could flow south more quickly." Daenerys saw the sense in that. She beckoned Sansa to a seat, then sat across from her, Melisandre standing at a respectful remove. "I like the idea. Our coffers aren't unlimited, but if the North invests some resources alongside the Crown, we can share the burden. I'll speak with Tyrion about arranging a joint venture. As for the brigands, I'll have my men cross-reference any suspicious groups that might have fled from the south. Perhaps we can cut off their support if it's not purely local." Sansa's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, her eyes glinting with relief. "That would be most welcome, Your Grace. Thank you. The North does not forget those who aided us against the greatest threat we've ever known." Daenerys studied Sansa's face, remembering the tension that had once existed between them. Something had softened in the Lady of Winterfell, or perhaps Daenerys herself had changed enough to see beyond old suspicions. "We stand together," Daenerys said simply, "for the good of all." They spoke a while longer, discussing practicalities. Sansa also asked after Arya, who was rumored to be traveling the distant seas in search of new horizons. Daenerys admitted she had no news, but offered to keep an ear open for any unusual ships making port. Finally, Sansa took her leave, promising to stay a few days in the capital before returning north. As the day wound down, Tyrion arrived with an update on the Vale mission. Word had come that Ser Davos and Ricardo had reached the Bloody Gate safely. Talks with the mountain clans were set to begin, though initial reports suggested the clans remained wary. Some spat at the notion of bowing to any king or queen below the mountain. Tyrion sighed, swirling wine in a goblet. "It might be a drawn-out process. If they absolutely refuse reason, I expect we'll have to forcibly push them back. But if anyone can find a middle ground, it's Davos." Daenerys agreed. "I trust him, and Ricardo is sensible. He won't slaughter them unnecessarily. Let's pray it ends without too much blood." Tyrion set the goblet down. "Speaking of prayers, or the lack thereof, I also have an update on the Basilisk's Tooth. They've set up camp outside the city walls, near the Mud Gate, apparently offering their services to lesser lords. So far, they've caused no trouble. But keep them in mind, we don't want them turning rogue." Daenerys's lips tightened at the memory of their offer. "Yes, we'll watch them. If they become a problem, we'll send them packing." Night fell once more, and Daenerys found herself in the gardens, seeking a moment of calm. The torches along the path cast flickering pools of light on the manicured shrubs and gravel walks. Somewhere above, the moon swam behind thin clouds. She paused by a fountain, hearing water splash over stone. So much had changed in so short a time. She was no longer the conqueror. She was the caretaker, the manager of a kingdom's everyday trials. The realm's future hinged on her decisions, big and small. Soft footsteps sounded on the gravel behind her. She turned to see Dario approaching, hands folded behind his back. He inclined his head. "Your Grace, apologies if I intrude." She offered a faint smile, arms crossing. "No intrusion, Dario. What brings you to the gardens at this hour?" He shrugged, glancing at the fountain. "Sometimes I like to walk at night. Reminds me of Essos, though the air here is cooler. I saw you from a distance and thought to greet you." She studied him. Under the torchlight, his once flamboyant manner seemed tempered by reflection. "Is something on your mind?" He let out a low chuckle. "I'm not much for subtlety, am I?" "Very well, yes. I wanted to say that my men and I stand ready for anything you require. But I also understand that times have changed. Peace is not a Sellsword's battlefield." Daenerys inclined her head. "You've done well, Dario. Securing the coasts, helping to chase the Ironborn raiders, your efforts are appreciated. Are you restless?" He shrugged again, faint regret in his smile. "A bit. I won't lie and say I don't miss the thrill of battle. But I also see the good you're doing here. It's a different sort of victory, forging alliances and dealing with disputes. Maybe that's what the world needs now, not more bloodshed." She regarded him gently. "You could return to Meereen if you wished. You said they're stable now, but perhaps they still need guidance. Or you could remain here, find a purpose in protecting those who can't protect themselves." He hesitated, eyes flicking to the ground. "Meereen is fine without me, better off perhaps. The freedmen lead themselves. That was your vision, after all. As for here, yes, I think I'll stay. At least for a time. I swore my sword to you and I'll keep that oath." Daenerys nodded, a subtle warmth in her chest. "I'm glad to have you. Just understand that this new age might not bring the same excitements. If war returns, it will be for dire reasons, not conquest." Dario dipped his head in acknowledgement. "Understood, my queen." They parted ways under the quiet hush of the garden's moonlit paths. Daenerys returned to her chambers, reflecting on how far both she and Dario had come from their earlier days in Essos. The world had demanded they adapt, and they had done so in their own ways. The following morning brought an unexpected flurry of excitement. a raven arrived from Ser Davos in the Vale, reporting that initial talks with the mountain clans had yielded a surprising shift. One of the clan chiefs claimed to have dreamt of a lady in red flames who warned them not to spill the blood of the chosen queen's men. This opened a cautious dialogue during which they agreed to meet Davos on neutral ground. Ricardo reported that the clans were still armed and suspicious, but no violence had erupted so far. Daenerys read the letter aloud to Tyrion and Melisandre, then lowered it thoughtfully. A lady in red flames? Could that be a rumor of Melisandre? Or simply a vision they conjured? Melisandre spread her hands. Whatever it is, it seems to have stayed their hostility. Tyrion scratched his chin, a glimmer of mirth in his eyes. Perhaps we should send Melisandre up there. She seems to have an uncanny ability to sway the faith of folk. Daenerys considered. I'd rather not dispatch her so soon after she's established the temple here. Besides, this might be enough. If they're open to talk, Davos can handle it. Let's trust him to see it through. Tyrion nodded. Agreed. I'll write back with our encouragement. Another day of governance began. Daenerys listened to a spate of minor disputes, land boundaries, trade disagreements, petty squabbles. It never ended, but she met each complaint with the stoic resolve she'd cultivated. In the late afternoon, a hush fell when a messenger arrived from Lord Tarly in Horn Hill requesting a royal audience by Raven. The message was cryptic, but it hinted at new developments regarding the farmland in the Reach. She scheduled a meeting for the following week. The realm was vast, and each region had its own needs. That evening, she found herself restless. Instead of retiring, she ventured onto the castle walls. The guards parted for her, letting her walk along the high battlements unimpeded. From this vantage, she could see the lights of King's Landing sprawled below like 1,000 flickering candles. The night sky was deep blue, scattered with a handful of stars. Drogon and Rhaegal roost somewhere in the darkness. She saw only a faint silhouette on a far turret, likely Rhaegal's watchful shape. She spotted a figure leaning on the stone merlin, gazing outward. As she drew nearer, she recognized it was Gendry Baratheon, cloak pulled tight against the breeze. He turned at the sound of her approach, face illuminated by the torches. "Your Grace," he greeted with a respectful dip of his head. "Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head. "Too many thoughts." "You." "Same," he admitted. "I was thinking of Summerhall. It's said that's where Aegon V died in a great fire trying to hatch dragon eggs. I can't help but feel it's a place haunted by old ghosts." Daenerys joined him at the battlement, looking southward. "I've read bits of that history. Summerhall was meant to be a place of joy, but it ended in tragedy. Perhaps it's fitting that outlaws hole up there, claiming false Baratheon heritage. A reminder of how fragile everything can be." Gendry exhaled, shoulders tense. "I want to preserve what's left of my family's name in a better light, if possible. Robert was Robert, but I don't want to be like him. I'd rather be known for rebuilding, not tearing down." Daenerys inclined her head, empathy stirring. "And you have that chance now, Lord Baratheon. The Stormlands are important to the realm. With your leadership, they can thrive." She paused, letting the wind swirl around them. "You were raised a commoner, yet you stand among lords. Does that weigh on you?" He glanced at her, a trace of a smile on his lips. "All the time. Sometimes I feel like a blacksmith in fancy clothes. But I do my best. Maybe that's what we have in common. Neither of us expected to rule, but here we are." She let out a soft chuckle. "True enough. My brother always spoke of the throne, but life changed my path." She peered at the city lights again, feeling a strange kinship with Gendry in that shared sense of improbable destiny. "Let us hope we manage well." They fell quiet, listening to the distant hum of King's Landing at night. Eventually, Gendry bid her good evening and headed off, leaving Daenerys alone with her thoughts and the crisp wind. She closed her eyes, inhaling the complex scents of the city, coal fires, baking bread, a faint hint of sewage from the lower wards. This was her capital, imperfect but alive. The days that followed brought more developments, large and small. Lord Tarly arrived from Horn Hill, conferring with Daenerys about stabilizing the grain supply in the Reach. He proposed a new rotational crop system that might yield better harvests. Daenerys readily agreed, seeing potential for feeding more of the realm. In return, she promised road improvements and tax incentives for farmers. The negotiations concluded amicably, a sign that House Tarly was settling into the new order after the bloody downfall of Randall Tarly and the old alliances with the Lannisters. Word came that the outlaws in Summerhall had been routed by the Storm's End garrison. Their self-proclaimed armed Baratheon fled into the woods. The handful of men captured insisted they were desperate peasants seeking protection. Daenerys ordered them turned over to local authorities for fair trials rather than summary executions. Meanwhile, the basilisk's tooth cell's words continued to lurk near the mud gate, occasionally taking small contracts from lesser merchants to guard caravans. Tyrion's spies reported no serious misconduct on their part yet. Around the same time, a raven arrived from the Vale bearing a single parchment with Ser Davos's succinct words. Clans receptive to negotiation. Some talk of old grudges, but no immediate violence. They asked about the Red Woman. Seemed to revere her as a spirit who warned them in dreams. Possibly they had visions. Ricardo has done well, no blood spilled. We'll continue discussions, might finalize in a fortnight. We'll keep you informed. Daenerys let out a breath of relief. Every sign of peace upheld was a triumph in her eyes. She showed the letter to Melisandre, who only raised her eyebrows, murmuring that the Lord of Light worked in mysterious ways. Perhaps the clans had indeed seen a vision. Amid these steady improvements, she also prepared for an influx of travelers. King's Landing was starting to attract visitors again, some for trade, others for curiosity about the famed queen who had slain the Night King. Over the course of a week, a caravan from Braavos arrived with exotic wares, and a troupe of dancers from Volantis sought permission to perform for coin in the city squares. Daenerys granted them entry, mindful of the cultural exchanges that might foster goodwill. She arranged for the gold cloaks to monitor them for any wrongdoing. In the midst of these daily tasks, she continued her personal rituals, meeting occasionally with Melisandre, scanning the flames for glimpses of trouble. While she did not rely on prophecy, she found some comfort in the Red Priestess's unwavering conviction that a better future was possible. She also spent time with her dragons, ensuring Rhaegal and Drogon stayed well-fed on the Crownland's livestock allotment. Without Viserion, a pang of loss remained, but she cherished the two that survived. One evening, a hush fell over the Red Keep as Daenerys received a raven marked urgent. The letter bore the seal of Pike. She opened it, scanning the contents rapidly, heart-pounding. Yara reported that a large, unidentified war galley had been sighted near the Outer Isles, its black sails reminiscent of Euron's dreaded silence. Wary of an ambush, Yara pulled back her patrol ships, uncertain if it was truly Euron or a trick. She requested reinforcements, uncertain if a battle loomed. Daenerys summoned Daario and Admiral Belrio to an emergency council. Tyrion arrived as well, tension etched across his features. They pored over Yara's letter, weighing options. Belrio suggested sending a swift flotilla to join Yara at sea. Daario agreed, eager to corner the potential threat. Daenerys listened, jaw clenched, as they laid out possible routes. The notion of Euron's return set her nerves on edge. Finally, she made her decision. They would dispatch 4 war galleys and a messenger ship to reinforce Yara. If the black-sailed vessel truly was Euron's, they would engage carefully, ensuring no reckless charges that might cost lives. She penned a swift reply to Yara, instructing her to hold position until reinforcements arrived. The city buzzed with the news. She prayed this was another false alarm, or a single renegade crew, not a resurgence of full-scale reaving. Days ticked by, fraught with anticipation. No immediate word came from Yara, leaving the capital in uneasy suspense. In the meantime, Daenerys pressed on, finalizing a new law that prohibited forced labor in any of the Crown's projects, an echo of her stance against slavery in Essos. She also oversaw expansions to the city's granaries, preparing for future winters. Through it all, she carried the weight of uncertainty about the Ironborn threat. At last, a raven fluttered into the rookery, bringing an update. The black-sailed ship had been sighted off the coast of Old Wyke, one of the smaller Iron Islands. Yara's scouts identified the crew as remnants of Euron's men, though the Crow's Eye himself was not confirmed aboard. The ship's presence caused panic among local Ironborn, who recalled Euron's cruelty. Then, without warning, the ship vanished into a fog bank. Yara surmised they might be testing the waters, trying to rally old loyalists. But no major attacks materialized. Relief and frustration warred in Daenerys' mind. Another ephemeral threat. Another piece of the puzzle that refused to fall into place. She ordered Yara to maintain vigilance, but not to chase phantoms. The realm held its collective breath, uncertain if the storm was truly passing, or if it merely lingered beyond the horizon. In quieter moments, Daenerys allowed herself to reflect on the path she had taken. She recalled the cramped quarters aboard the ship that first carried her to Meereen, the scorching sun in the plaza of Astapor when she unleashed her dragons on the slavers. She thought of how she had stood on the high walls of Winterfell, waiting for a night that might have spelled the end of all life. And then she remembered her father's dark legacy, the cautionary tale that had been seared into her by countless warnings. She had witnessed enough tragedy to know how easily a ruler could fall from grace. Yet each passing day, she found reasons to hope. The small improvements, clans that chose diplomacy, farmland that thrived, hearts slowly won over by acts of compassion. These were the true victories. They were incremental, unglamorous, but they mattered more than any single conquest. In late autumn, Ser Davos and Ricardo returned from the Vale. They brought news that a fragile truce had been established with the mountain clans, who agreed to refrain from raiding travelers so long as certain trade routes were respected and a small tribute paid, mostly grain and salted meats, to ensure the clans did not starve. It was not an elegant solution, but it was a step toward lasting peace in those high passes. Davos recounted how one of the clan chiefs insisted that a red-haired spirit appeared in his dream, warning him to avoid war. Melisandre only listened quietly, curiosity in her eyes, but made no comment. Daenerys thanked Davos and Ricardo for handling the mission well, awarding them both with praise and gratitude in front of the court. With that success, the realm seemed to settle further. Daenerys allowed herself the smallest sense of accomplishment. The roads were safer, the harvest decent, and the city calmer. She continued her policy of addressing disputes personally when needed, maintaining a stable presence. Gradually, King's Landing began to hum with renewed life, markets bustled, craft guilds thrived, and travelers from across the narrow sea mingled with Westerosi folk. Musicians performed in the squares, and stories of the Dragon Queen's merciful judgments spread. One evening, after a day of hearing land disputes in the Riverlands, Daenerys stood on the high balcony of the Red Keep, accompanied by Melisandre. The city stretched below under the silver glow of moonlight. Melisandre glanced at her queen, then ventured, "Your Grace, I think the people are beginning to breathe again. More smiles on the streets, fewer rumors of revolt." Daenerys nodded slowly. "I've noticed. It's heartening. We have so far to go, but each day we show them we're not a tyranny. That might be enough to build trust." Melisandre ventured a small, warm smile. "It is how you ruled in Meereen once you established peace, by hearing the people's voices, granting them a measure of agency. That was what earned you love, not fear." Daenerys turned, resting a hand on Melisandre's shoulder. "Thank you for standing by me all this time. Through everything. I couldn't have done it alone." Melisandre's eyes shone with loyalty. "I will always stand with you, Your Grace." In the days that followed, a sense of cautious optimism settled over King's Landing. The Basilisk's Tooth sold a portion of their services to a minor lord in the Crownlands, escorting his shipments along the roads, a move that suggested they had chosen a relatively peaceful occupation. Tyrion no longer seemed as worried about them, though he advised continued vigilance. Melisandre oversaw expansions to the small Lawler Temple, which now offered skill training for the poor, teaching them basic reading and arithmetic. Some in the Faith of the Seven viewed it skeptically, but Daenerys encouraged healthy competition, seeing that both the Septs and the Red Temple offered charitable works. The city's poor benefited from this rivalry of generosity. Dario began drilling a newly formed City Watch cavalry unit, which would help keep the roads near King's Landing safe. He seemed to find a sense of purpose in the city's security, no longer itching for distant wars. Once or twice, Daenerys witnessed him bickering good-naturedly with the new Gold Cloak commander over training methods, but it never escalated beyond friendly sparring. She sensed he had settled into an acceptance of her new role and, by extension, his. Sansa Stark, having lingered longer than expected, departed southward again with her retinue, intent on meeting with Tarly in Horn Hill to discuss joint trade with the North. She bid Daenerys farewell in the throne room, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It's a different court than when Cersei ruled," she remarked quietly. "It feels calmer, less made of knives." Daenerys allowed a faint laugh. "That is what I aimed for." "Safe travels, Lady Sansa." The red-haired woman curtsied, then departed, leaving Daenerys with the sense of a new accord between them, a far cry from the wary glances they once exchanged at Winterfell. Such small personal reconciliations mirrored the realm's broader healing. Yet not all was tranquil. Trouble occasionally flared. A band of brigands ambushed a merchant train in the Riverlands, prompting a swift response from local troops. And near Duskendale, a rumored cult arose, worshipping some twisted notion of the Great Other, scrawling cryptic symbols on walls and scaring townsfolk. Daenerys dispatched investigators, uncertain if it was a genuine threat or mere hysteria. Always, pockets of chaos sought footholds, reminding her that peace was an ongoing effort, not a final state. Weeks passed into months. The memory of the Great War lingered in stories and scars, but life marched on. Daenerys found a steady rhythm in her role, balancing the crown's demands with her personal convictions. She took time to see the small transformations within King's Landing, new workshops, a partially restored dragon pit repurposed for civic gatherings, and orphanage built with crown funds on the city's outskirts. Her dragons soared overhead, often drifting beyond the city to hunt. Sometimes she flew with them, feeling the rush of wind, reminding herself she was still Daenerys Stormborn, breaker of chains, who had once walked through fire. But each time she returned to the palace, to her seat of governance, to the ongoing work of building a realm that might endure. During these flights, Melisandre occasionally accompanied her. The priestess found solace in the heights, and Daenerys allowed her that. On one such flight, at the cusp of twilight, Drogon glided over the crownlands, fields and rivers spread below in a patchwork. Melisandre clung behind the queen, robes secured against the wind. When they landed near a grassy hill overlooking a quiet hamlet, Daenerys dismounted and turned to see Melisandre gazing at the setting sun, eyes alight. The priestess spoke in a voice nearly lost to the wind. "Your kingdom is forging its new shape. I feel the flame of possibility here. The battles you fought echo, but they do not chain you." Daenerys watched the horizon, remembering how it once seemed every sunrise brought a new calamity. Now there was a gentleness to the land. "It's taken many sacrifices," she murmured. "Too many lives lost, including dear friends. I haven't forgotten the cost." Melisandre nodded. "Nor should you. But you continue forward living. That is the essence of the Lord of Light's gift, life that pushes past darkness. Each day you steer your people toward hope. It's the greatest victory of all." They stood together in silence, the sun's last rays painting the sky in fiery orange. Daenerys felt a quiet gratitude for the stillness, for the chance to see a realm at peace, if only fleetingly. Then they mounted Drogon once more, taking flight back to the city before full dark fell. That night, a gentle rain pelted the Red Keep's roofs, filling the cisterns and washing the streets clean. Daenerys listened from her chambers, half lulled by the steady drumming. She thought of her mother, of the storms that raged the night she was born on Dragonstone. She thought of the prophecy that once haunted her, Azor Ahai reborn, the prince that was promised. She had faced that prophecy, lived through the darkest threat. And now she guided a realm forward, not as a fabled hero but as a queen of flesh and blood. A soft knock came, and Melisandre peered in, a candle illuminating her features. "Your Grace, forgive me, but a raven just arrived from Yara Greyjoy, urgent." Daenerys roused herself, taking the letter. By the candlelight she saw Yara's strong, slanted handwriting. "We've engaged the black-sailed ship. Confirmed it is the Silence, Euron Greyjoy's vessel. He is alive, leading a small but vicious crew. We clashed off the coast near Great Wyke. He escaped into a storm, though we damaged his ship. We're tracking him. Be warned, he's cunning, might flee toward the west or try a daring raid. I'll keep you informed." Daenerys' heart hammered. So Euron still lived. The serpent in the sea, the cunning threat that refused to vanish. She reread Yara's words, thinking of Melisandre's mention of a serpent crossing the sea. This might be the prophecy's shadow, or it might simply be the last throes of a cruel man. Either way, she could not dismiss it. She looked at Melisandre. "Wake Tyrion. Summon Daario and Admiral Belrio. We must plan. If Euron is cornered, we strike before he disappears again. I won't let him sow terror any longer." Melisandre inclined her head and hurried off. Daenerys rose, ignoring the late hour and the patter of rain on the windows. She dressed quickly in a practical tunic and boots, heart-thudding with grim purpose. The realm's burdens were never done, but she would see them through. Euron Greyjoy had escaped too many times, haunted the seas with cruelty. Now, if the moment was right, she intended to bring an end to his threat. In the council chamber, the candles were lit, and Tyrion arrived hastily, hair tousled from being roused. Daario appeared soon after, sword at his hip, looking eager for action. Admiral Belrio laid out charts on the wooden table, candlelight flickering over the lines denoting the Iron Islands. They spoke in hushed but urgent tones. Yara's letter indicated she had inflicted damage on Euron's ship, possibly disabling its main mast. If that was true, he would need to either land for repairs or scuttle the vessel. If he tries to land on the Iron Islands, Yara's men can corner him, Daario reasoned, eyes gleaming with the prospect of finishing the job. He might attempt a desperate flight to the open sea, though. If he does, we have to intercept. Admiral Belrio traced a route on the map. He could try for the west, around the arbor, or slip north of the neck. Our current fleets are mostly near the middle coasts. We'll need to reposition quickly if we aim to cut him off. Tyrion cleared his throat. Time is short. We can send ravens to lords with ships in the Westerlands or the Reach, but those ships might not be disciplined enough to face a cunning foe. Daenerys listened, her mind assessing the risk. We proceed with all haste. Dario, I want you to gather a small fleet enough to move swiftly. Join with Yara's forces. If we coordinate from both sides, we might catch him. But take care, Euron is dangerous. Cornered men can do unspeakable things. Dario grinned, though it was laced with seriousness. Understood, my queen. We'll show him no mercy. Belrio outlined how many ships they could spare without leaving King's Landing vulnerable. Tyrion approved a portion of funds to outfit them quickly. As dawn neared, the meeting ended. Dario left to marshal the men, Tyrion stayed behind with Belrio to finalize details, and Daenerys stepped into the corridor, exhaustion weighing on her limbs. Yet she felt a coil of tension. She would do everything possible to ensure Euron Greyjoy never again threatened her realm. Before returning to her chambers, she detoured to the library, seeking a quiet moment. The shelves loomed in the flickering lamplight, and she ran a finger along the spines of ancient volumes. Once more, she felt the swirl of fate. She had banished the darkness of the undead, subdued the Lannister tyrant, and now one last lingering shard of chaos lurked at sea. If she could root out even that, perhaps the realm might know a deeper peace. Melisandre stood in a corner as though waiting. The priestess lifted her gaze from a tome she had been examining, the ruby at her throat catching the lamplight. You make ready for a final confrontation with the Crow's Eye? Daenerys approached slowly, not entirely surprised to see her. Yes. If Yara can trap him, we'll strike. I want to end this threat. Melisandre inclined her head. You have the chance to cut out the last rotten piece. But take care. A cornered foe can still draw blood. The flame offers no certainty, only that you stand on the cusp of choice. Daenerys closed her eyes a moment, letting the heaviness settle. I'll do what must be done. If he surrenders, maybe he'll face trial. If not, dragonfire or steel will end him. Melisandre reached out, placing a gentle hand on Daenerys' arm. Lawless light guide you, your grace. And remember, whatever the outcome, you have brought the realm back from a precipice. That is the true victory. They exchanged a lingering look, queen and priestess, each shaped by fire and prophecy. Then Daenerys stepped away, heading for what little rest she could afford before the next day's flurry of preparations. Within 48 hours, Dario sailed west with a lean, fast squadron of war galleys, each bearing the three-headed dragon banner. Word reached Yara that reinforcements were on the way, and she vowed to keep Euron pinned if possible. Days dragged on with no further letters. The capital braced for a final showdown, but no certainty came. One late afternoon, Daenerys stood on the western ramparts of King's Landing, gazing over the sea. The sun hung low, gilding the waves in orange. She found herself praying silently that Yara would triumph, that no more innocent blood would be shed. She recalled the dreamlike warnings of a serpent in the sea. Perhaps it would all end quietly like so many ephemeral threats. Or perhaps Euron's cunning would once again slip from their grasp. She turned to see Melisandre approach, carrying a fresh letter. Daenerys' heart kicked up. She took it, broke the seal, and read. Victory. Dario caught Euron off the coast of Pike. Fierce battle. Euron refused quarter, raving about drowning the world in night. We boarded the Silence. Dario slew Euron on the deck. Casualties on both sides, but the threat is ended. The Silence burned. I remain to secure the Isles. We'll write again soon. Yara. Daenerys exhaled in a rush, knees weakening. It was done. Euron Greyjoy was dead, and his dreaded ship destroyed. Melisandre, reading her expression, ventured, good news. Daenerys managed a nod, passing the letter. Melisandre skimmed it, then offered a relieved smile. Finally. Daenerys closed her eyes, letting the knowledge sink in. One more shard of chaos removed. She lifted her gaze to the horizon, attention leaving her body. She prayed that the souls Euron had tormented might find peace now. Dario had delivered a final blow, forging a safer sea lane for the realm. There would be pockets of reavers yet, but without Euron's monstrous will guiding them, the Iron Islands might truly adopt Yara's new path. She released a slow breath. The rest of the evening passed in a subdued sense of triumph. She announced the news to her court, which responded with applause and gratitude. In private, she reflected on the last vestiges of war drifting away from Westeros. The Great War had ended, Cersei Lannister had been overthrown, and now Euron Greyjoy was gone. There would always be new struggles, outlaws, local feuds, the demands of governance, but the grand nightmares that once loomed over the realm had been laid to rest. On the day Dario and Yara returned to King's Landing, escorting the captured Ironborn rebels who had survived the final battle, a crowd gathered at the harbor to see them land. Daenerys stood near the pier, flanked by Tyrion, Melisandre, and a retinue of Unsullied. Dario disembarked, splattered with salt and the grime of battle, a proud light in his eyes. He bowed extravagantly. Your Grace, the seas are safer tonight. She nodded, face alight with a reserved smile. Well done, Dario Naharis. You and Yara both. Yara followed, her short hair caked with salt, but her demeanor confident. The silence is ashes at the bottom of the sea. Euron rots with it. The Iron Islands are free of his madness at last. Daenerys clasped Yara's arm in a show of solidarity. You've upheld your vow to me and to your people. Now may they choose prosperity over reaving. Yara bobbed her head. They will. I'll make sure of it. Cheers rose from onlookers, though many didn't fully grasp the significance beyond the simple notion that a villain had been slain. Daenerys understood that significance deeply. It marked the final major threat from the old wars. The realm could now breathe easier. That evening, a modest celebration took place in the Red Keep's courtyard. Musicians played a spirited tune, and the crowd that had assembled included sailors, dockworkers, soldiers, and townsfolk, all reveling in a sense of relief. Yara drank heartily, toasting fallen comrades and a new era for the Ironborn. Dario accepted well wishes but maintained a certain composure which Daenerys recognized as a mark of his growth. He no longer sought only personal glory, he recognized that this victory belonged to the realm. Daenerys herself mingled, offering words of thanks to those who had fought, listening to the hopes of ordinary folk who now believed trade and travel might flourish unimpeded. She felt their gratitude wash over her, a balm for the countless hardships she had endured. Toward the end of the evening, she stood near a brazier, the flames dancing in her eyes. Tyrion approached, sipping wine, a satisfied cast to his features. He gestured to the crowd. Not a grand feast like the old Targaryen courts might have thrown, but a heartfelt one nonetheless. Daenerys nodded, letting the music and laughter fill her senses. It's enough. We don't need excess. It's the unity that matters. Tyrion offered a small bow. Indeed. Congratulations, Your Grace. With Euron gone, the last of the major usurpers is dealt with. The realm stands on firmer ground than it has in many a generation. She closed her eyes for a moment, inhaling the night air. Yes. Let's hope we can keep it that way. A faint note of caution tempered her relief. She had learned never to assume complete peace. But for the first time in years, she felt the realm's future brightening without a looming cataclysm on the horizon. The revelry lasted into the night, subdued but genuine. Daenerys eventually slipped away, seeking the hush of the ramparts. She found Melisandre there, as she often did, gazing over the city. The priestess turned, her expression caught between solemnity and a hint of contentment. The serpent is slain, Melisandre murmured. The realm sighs in relief. Daenerys stepped to the parapet, looking at the glow of torchlight below. Yes. Another shadow lifted. Melisandre's ruby glowed softly. You have brought the dawn after the darkest night. The living are free to shape their destiny, free from the terrors that once loomed. Daenerys's heart pounded gently, remembering the mass of undead at Winterfell, the fearsome chaos of the city under Cersei, and the nightmares of the sea under Euron. All that felt distant now, replaced by a determined sense of rebuilding. I only pray I can guide them well, she said softly. Melisandre's voice was warm. You will. You've learned to see power not as a weapon, but a responsibility. That is the greatest strength of all. They stood side by side, letting the night wash over them. Daenerys found a measure of peace in that moment. She pictured a future where farmland thrived, roads bustled with safe commerce, the north and the south exchanged goods freely, the Vale's mountains remained tranquil, and the Iron Islands forged a new reputation. All of that was possible now, if she and her allies persevered. She heard distant laughter from the courtyard. The music of a new era rung in triumphant notes. At length, she turned to the Red Priestess. Come, she said, a small smile curving her lips. Let's walk among the people a while. Let them see that their queen shares their joy, not just their burdens. Melisandre returned the smile. As you wish, Your Grace. Arm in arm, they descended the stairs into the courtyard. The torchlight played on their faces as they moved among the gathered folk. Lords, knights, sailors, commoners, freedmen, all mingling in a brief respite from the travails of life. Some paused to bow or curtsy, others simply watched in awe. The queen was no distant figure on a throne. She was here, in their midst, celebrating a victory that promised safety for their homes. Tyrion, spotting them, raised his wine goblet with an amiable grin. Dario caught Daenerys's eye, giving an appreciative tilt of his head. Yara nodded in solidarity from where she stood, recounting the final battle to an eager group of listeners. A hush of respect followed Daenerys, but she also sensed genuine warmth, no longer the fear that once accompanied the sight of dragons overhead. Step by step, day by day, she had built trust. For the rest of that night, she savored the simple human connection, the relief that welled up in every corner of the gathering. She thought of the North's renewed fields, of the mountain clans signing uneasy truces, of the Dothraki scattered back across the seas, free to roam. She thought of the small children in King's Landing who no longer cowered at every rumor of war. All the heartbreak, all the struggles had led here to a fragile but profound sense of renewal. Eventually, the revelers dispersed, drifting back to their homes, and the courtyard quieted under the stars. Daenerys found herself leaning against a low stone wall, gazing up at the sky. Melisandre stood near, silent as a statue. A cool breeze stirred the lingering smell of roasted meat and spilled ale. Daenerys turned inward, feeling the pulse of her own heart. Once she had been a frightened girl sold into marriage, then a fierce liberator in Essos, then a conqueror stepping onto Westerosi's soil, and finally a champion against the undead. Now she stood as a queen who mended a realm, determined that no chain would ever bind the people again, be it slavery, tyranny, or the horrors of an ancient winter. The road ahead remained long, fraught with complexities. But the greatest storms had passed. Fire and blood had, paradoxically, paved the way for a gentler dawn. Melisandre finally broke the silence, her voice soft as the night breeze. "Your Grace, this is what you were meant for. Not the endless wars, but the chance to shape peace." Daenerys closed her eyes briefly, letting the words settle in her chest. Then she faced the Red Priestess, a calm resolve glowing in her own gaze. "Yes, and I will guard this peace as fiercely as I once fought for the throne. For them, for everyone who bled under the darkness." Melisandre touched the ruby at her throat. "Lawler's flame burns in you, bright as the dawn. May it guide this realm into an era of prosperity." Daenerys inclined her head in quiet gratitude. She felt the warmth of possibility fill her chest, an ember that promised to kindle new life in the kingdom. She pictured the sunrise that would come in a few short hours, washing the city in gold. The nightmares were behind them, and though human struggles would never vanish, they would face them together, forging a better tomorrow. She raised her eyes to the infinite stars, a faint smile on her lips, and let herself hope. Daenerys Targaryen slept more soundly in the weeks following Euron Greyjoy's defeat than she had at any other time since first landing in Westeros. Though her sleep was often brief, cut short by duties at dawn, she found it deeper, unburdened by the fear of imminent war or the nightmares of a reawakened darkness. Peace, however fragile, had begun to take hold. The Ironborn menace was quelled, the Vale's mountain clans pacified, the White Walkers defeated and gone. And in King's Landing, people slowly dared to believe that the time of constant bloodshed was behind them. She woke one cool morning to the muffled sounds of early foot traffic outside her windows. Hawkers calling out their wares, carts rumbling over cobblestones, the city's heartbeat. It had become a strangely comforting sound. Stretching in the pale light, Daenerys rose, dressed in a modest gown of soft gray fabric, and fastened a belt at her waist. Melisandre knocked quietly, entering to help arrange the queen's braids. They worked in companionable silence for a moment. Melisandre's deft fingers wove Daenerys' hair with a practiced ease, and Daenerys couldn't help but recall the old days in Meereen, when everything had been so uncertain. Life remained uncertain now, but in different ways. "Good morning, Your Grace," Melisandre said softly. "I've brought a list of the day's appointments. Tyrion hopes to speak with you about a new set of trade agreements. Gendry has asked if you'll grant him time to discuss developments in the Stormlands, and there's a visiting envoy from Old Town, a maester apparently, seeking an audience regarding something he calls the Great Archive Project." Daenerys nodded. "We'll see them all in turn. Let's begin with Tyrion. And how is the city faring today? Any new troubles?" Melisandre offered a small smile in the mirror's reflection. "None that I've heard. The streets are busier than usual, but it seems to be due to an influx of traveling merchants. Food prices are holding steady. The gold cloaks report no serious disturbances." Daenerys exhaled a faint breath of relief. "Good. And Melisandre?" "She sent word she'll be at the new temple for most of the morning, overseeing a delivery of supplies. She mentioned an orphans fund she's organizing. Something about building a free infirmary as well." Daenerys' lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "It pleases me to see that side of her, working so directly for the people. She's gained a small measure of respect among them, Melisandre noted. Some remain wary, her manner can be unsettling, but she's proven generous. Once Daenerys' hair was done, they walked together from her chamber to a smaller council room. The Red Keep's corridors glowed with new torches. She occasionally passed the newly decorated tapestries, swirling dragon motifs that replaced the old Lannister lions, a reflection of changed rule. But she had intentionally avoided letting the city drown itself in Targaryen sigils alone. She wanted to remind people that all regions were represented, that this was a realm for everyone, not a single house's personal fiefdom. Tyrion greeted her with a stack of parchment under one arm and a sardonic smile. "Your Grace, I trust you slept well. Are you prepared to hear about the endless wonders of trade routes and tariff negotiations?" Daenerys settled in a carved wooden chair at the head of the table, motioning for him to sit. "I am, but do not test my patience too severely." He chuckled, pushing stray hair back from his forehead. "Understood. Well, the gist is this. We've been approached by envoys from Lys and Tyrosh, both free cities that rely heavily on commerce. They wish to bring their wares to King's Landing and explore new markets, particularly since word has spread that peace has taken root here and that the Ironborn are no longer terrorizing the seas. Naturally, they want low import tariffs and favorable docking fees." Daenerys frowned. Lys and Tyrosh both have a history of slavery. They also dabble in unsavory practices, piracy, covertly. Have they truly reformed, or do they simply see us as the next profitable venture? "That is precisely why I suggest caution," Tyrion said, rummaging through the papers. "We can negotiate, but we shouldn't open our doors wide without conditions. We can require that all trade is free of slave labor or the ownership of enslaved crews. We could insist on verifying their cargo as well. If they balk at these terms, we know their intentions are impure." Daenerys inclined her head. "Yes, and make it clear that any attempt to smuggle living cargo into Westeros will be met with swift punishment. I won't allow slave markets in my realm. If they accept our conditions, then I'll consider the trade routes." He scribbled a note in quick, spidery writing. "As you command." Next, we have an opportunity to open new farmland in the Crownlands by draining a portion of the wetlands west of Cracklaw Point, an old plan from a previous monarchy that was never completed. The farmers are petitioning for crown support. It's a large investment, but it might yield good results in the long term. Daenerys took a moment to think, tapping her fingertips lightly on the table. "What do the local lords say?" Tyrion consulted the parchment. "Most are in favor. They see it as a chance to expand their holdings. One or two are worried about the cost of irrigation channels. We'd need engineers and labor." She sighed. "Let's do a small feasibility study, send a few skilled engineers to evaluate how much labor it would require. If it's truly viable, we'll proceed with partial crown funding. The rest must come from local lords who stand to profit." "Wise," Tyrion replied, quickly jotting down another note. "I'll have them gather resources and report back within a month." Their conversation stretched on, covering a half-dozen more issues from petty taxation adjustments to the need for reinforced roads leading to Rosby. Daenerys answered each with a measured calm she had learned over the past months. Tyrion left the chamber eventually, satisfied that they had a plan for the day's official responses. Soon after, Gendry arrived to speak with her, accompanied by a retainer in Baratheon colors. He bowed with his usual mixture of respect and lingering awkwardness, still not entirely used to being addressed as Lord Baratheon. Daenerys beckoned him forward. He explained that in the Stormlands, rebuilding efforts continued, old castles and keeps battered by prior wars were being repaired. Merchants had started using the roads again, though some of the more remote hamlets still struggled. Gendry's request, a small grant of iron tools and seats from the crown's surplus to help the poorest villages get back on their feet. They were devastated during the fight against the White Walkers, he said, his voice earnest. They lost crops, livestock. The storms this year have been harsh too. Daenerys listened with genuine concern. "We do have a store of surplus seeds from the Reach, and we can spare some iron tools if the blacksmiths can forge them quickly enough. But we'll need to coordinate distribution. Are your men prepared to ensure the supplies go where they're needed?" "Yes, Your Grace," Gendry replied. "I have a small corps of loyal knights and stewards who can oversee it. I want to see people in my lands fed. I don't want them forced to flee or turn to banditry." She gave a firm nod. "Then you shall have what you need. Work with Tyrion to handle the logistics. The crown will bear some costs, but you and other local lords must contribute as well. This fosters cooperation." Gendry smiled, relief evident. Thank you, your grace. I won't squander your goodwill. When he departed, Daenerys took a moment to reflect on how different the realm felt compared to a year or two prior. Rather than pleas for armies or defenses against existential threats, lords now approached her asking for seeds, tools, roads, ways to improve the daily lives of their people. It was a far cry from the chaos she had once known. She allowed herself a small sigh of gratitude. Melisandre then admitted the next visitor, the Old Town envoy. He was a middle-aged maester wearing gray robes and a heavy chain, introduced as Maester Lyman. With calm courtesy, he bowed before Daenerys and explained that he represented an initiative by the Archmasters of the Citadel. Your Grace, he said, voice low and measured, the Citadel has long prided itself on preserving knowledge. We have a dream of creating a more expansive library, not only in Old Town but eventually copying volumes to share with major seats across Westeros. The Great Archive Project, as we call it, would place sets of important texts, histories, medical treatises, scientific works, in the keeps of major lords, so no region is bereft of scholarship. Daenerys studied him. That sounds admirable. And you want the crown's support? Lyman inclined his head. Yes, in two ways. First, financial assistance in copying the manuscripts, parchment, inks, scribes. Second, the Citadel respectfully requests that you issue an edict ensuring safe passage for our scribes across the realm and encouraging lords to welcome them. These scribes will gather local histories, perhaps discovering knowledge that's never made it back to Old Town. We believe knowledge belongs to all who would use it responsibly. Daenerys considered the idea. The North had once been suspicious of maesters, but with the current climate of collaboration, it might be feasible. She also knew many lords, especially smaller houses, had minimal libraries, lack of education often bred ignorance and fear. I am open to the concept. Westeros could benefit from a broader spread of knowledge. But I'd like to ensure that these scribes do not incite unrest. We've seen how fear of outsiders can stir trouble. Understood, Lyman replied. The Citadel will abide by any guidelines you set. We merely wish to bring knowledge and record it. If trouble arises, we can withdraw at your command. All right, Daenerys said. I'll discuss the funding with the Master of Coin. Provided the cost is not excessive and certain conditions are met, like ensuring the scribes treat each region respectfully, I will issue a decree supporting your travels. It might do the realm much good. Maester Lyman bowed deeply, gratitude shining in his eyes. You are gracious, your grace. The Archmasters will be delighted to hear it. After he departed, Daenerys sighed once more, massaging her temple. She was glad to see Westeros shifting focus to matters of knowledge and rebuilding. Yet the demands never ceased. Each request, however small, had to be weighed for its impact on the realm. Melisandre gave her a sympathetic smile, offering a cup of watered wine. Daenerys accepted gratefully. Shall we pause for a midday meal before the next appointment? Melisandre asked gently. Yes, that might be wise, Daenerys agreed. There's much left to do this afternoon, but I don't want to collapse halfway through. They shared a simple meal of bread, figs, and cheese in a nearby solar. The hush of midday cast the Red Keep in a lazy glow. Daenerys found herself savoring the moment, no urgent crises, no war drums. She glanced at Melisandre. Sometimes I struggle to believe we're really here, she admitted softly. It was always war, always survival. Now governance. Melisandre's dark eyes were warm with empathy. You've earned this. And you've adapted. I think you were always capable of leading in peace. Your heart was never set on conquest for its own sake. The realm sees that. Daenerys touched her friend's hand. Thank you. Then, setting aside her half-eaten bread, she rose. Let's continue. They proceeded through corridors until they reached a terrace overlooking the sea where fresh air greeted them with a gentle breeze. The water sparkled under the midday sun, and far in the distance, Daenerys caught sight of a black shape that might have been Drogon or Regal flying in lazy arcs. She felt a pang. She had not visited them as often since the realm settled into peace. They were still her children, but with fewer threats requiring their might, they roamed widely over farmland and coast. At some point, she would find time to fly again, to remember the exhilaration of the skies. Returning inside, she encountered Ser Barristan Selmy, who bowed in greeting. Your Grace, I bring news from the Queen's Guard. Ser Jason Bywater, the knight I recommended, stands ready to swear his vows. Shall we proceed with the ceremony? Daenerys recalled that open position in her personal guard. She had interviewed Ser Jason the prior week, a thoughtful young man with a strong moral compass. Yes. Let us do it before the day is over. Gather the Queen's Guard in the throne room. I'll see to it after the next audience. Barristan nodded, a faint smile creasing his weathered face. He is honored to serve. I'll make the arrangements." After a brief conversation with one more petitioner, a farmer from the Crownlands with an unusual case of boundary markers being moved, Daenerys moved to the throne room. The immense space was lit by tall windows and torches lining the walls. People were already gathering in hushed anticipation for Ser Jason Bywater's swearing of loyalty. Her current Queen's Guard, 5 in number, stood in a dignified row, their white cloaks pristine. Grey Worm had once been her chief protector, but he had departed for Noth, leaving a vacancy that was subsequently filled by another skilled knight. Now they would bring the guard to a full complement of 7. Daenerys ascended the Iron Throne, conscious of every eye upon her. The metal seat no longer felt hostile. In the old days, she had sat upon it and felt the weight of her ancestors' conquests. Now it felt like a seat of measured governance. She watched as Ser Barristan led Ser Jason forward. The young knight knelt, cloak pooling around his shoulders, head bowed in solemn respect. Ser Barristan spoke in a clear, resonant tone. "Your Grace, I present Ser Jason Bywater. He has been deemed worthy to join the Queen's Guard, swearing to defend your life and uphold your justice until his own life's end." Daenerys observed the man's earnest expression. A line of tension drew across his brow, but determination shone in his eyes. "Rise, Ser Jason," she said. Her voice echoed in the hall. "You stand before me as a knight of Westeros, prepared to pledge your sword and your honor?" He rose, though his head remained bowed in deference. "I do, your grace." Ser Barristan stepped aside, allowing Daenerys to descend from the throne. She approached with careful grace, Melisandre at her flank holding the ceremonial white cloak. Daenerys took the cloak from her friend, draping it across Ser Jason's shoulders. He took a knee again, gazing up at her. "Do you swear by all the gods, old and new, to protect and serve the realm, to defend the weak and uphold the laws of justice? Do you swear your life to the crown, forsaking any personal ambition that might conflict with your vow?" she asked. His voice rang firm. "I do. I swear it with all my heart, by the 7 and by the memory of those who came before me." She gave a solemn nod. "Then I, Daenerys Targaryen, first of my name, Queen of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men, Protector of the Realm, do name you to the Queen's Guard. Wear your cloak with honor, and may you never falter in your duty." Applause rippled through the room as she stepped back. Ser Barristan led Ser Jason to the side, and the newly sworn knight took his place among the other white-cloaked guards. It was a small ceremony, yet it felt significant. A reminder that even in peacetime, her life needed protection, that the realm still recognized traditions once overshadowed by war. She returned to the throne, concluding the official proceedings with a final word of gratitude. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Ser Barristan lingered to speak softly with Daenerys. He seemed pleased. "Your Grace, I am honored to have helped expand the Queen's Guard with a worthy knight. I do not know how many years remain to me in this service, but I'm glad to see you with good protectors at hand." She smiled gently at the older knight. "You have served me faithfully beyond measure, Ser Barristan. I will always value your presence." He bowed in response, stepping back with the dignified grace that had become part of him. The remainder of the afternoon passed quickly. Daenerys spoke with a handful of lords about minor concerns and reviewed some updated accounts from Tyrion. When dusk settled, she ventured to the high walls overlooking the city. Lamps glowed in the streets below, and the hum of nighttime activity began. She noticed a subtle flicker of red from one corner, the small temple to R'hllor, where Melisandre was likely finishing her charitable tasks. Daenerys considered riding down to see it, but decided instead to spend time in the courtyard with R'hllor, who had alighted there not long before. Word had reached her that the green and bronze dragon had flown in to roost, while Drogon remained at large, possibly hunting along the coasts. Making her way to the courtyard, she dismissed the few guards who stood watch, wanting a moment of solitude. She found R'hllor coiled in a wide circle, tail fli, king idly across the flagstones. He lifted his great head when she approached, exhaling a gust of heated breath. The stable-like area set aside for the dragons had once been used for storing siege weapons. Now it belonged to these living icons of House Targaryen. Daenerys laid a careful hand on R'hllor's flank, feeling warmth radiate through his scaled hide. "I've neglected you," she murmured. "Forgive me. The realm calls me everywhere at once." R'hllor's only response was a low rumbling purr, his reptilian eyes half-lidded in contentment. She smiled, stroking the smooth curve of his scales. The hush of the courtyard enveloped them. In that quiet, she thought of Viserion, who had died and been raised as an undead abomination by the Night King. The memory still pricked her heart with sorrow. She was determined to ensure that no such horror ever befell her remaining children. "We'll find time for a proper flight," she promised the dragon. "You and I and Drogon, perhaps we'll tour the realm so they know you are not absent." Regal chuffed softly, as if in agreement. A clatter of armor made her turn. Melisandre had appeared at the courtyard's edge, accompanied by 2 temple acolytes carrying small crates. Upon spotting the queen, Melisandre inclined her head, sending the acolytes away. She approached, her red robes fluttering in the breeze. The ruby at her throat glimmered. "Your Grace," she greeted in her low, measured tone. "I did not realize you were here with Regal." Daenerys offered a slight smile. "I wanted a moment with him." "You've been busy at the temple?" Melisandre nodded. "We received donations of bedding and dried goods. They'll help feed and shelter many orphans who linger in the poorer districts. Each child is a gift of life, worth protecting from darkness." Daenerys brushed Regal's side absently. "I'm glad to hear it. You've done good work in the city, Melisandre." The priestess lowered her eyes in humility. "It is but a fraction of what I once sought to accomplish. I used to believe in grand prophecies, in kings chosen by fate. Now I find meaning in simpler acts of mercy." They stood quietly as the dragon's breathing rose and fell. The courtyard torches flickered, casting elongated shadows on the worn stones. Daenerys remembered how once Melisandre's unwavering faith had led to extremes: blood magic, shadows, illusions of absolute certainty. Now that same faith manifested in feeding the poor, building trust. Daenerys marveled at how far both of them had come. "Has the Lord of Light shown you any new visions?" Daenerys asked after a moment, a gentle curiosity in her tone. Melisandre's gaze slid toward the dragon, green scales glinting. "The flames are calmer these days. Occasionally, they show me glimpses, an unknown land far to the east, or a lonely shape in a wilderness of ice. But these images lack the urgency they once held. I do not sense a new threat rising, only the flicker of possibilities. Many destinies swirl in the world." Daenerys inclined her head. "Then perhaps we can breathe easy for a time." Melisandre pressed her lips. "So it would seem. Yet let us not forget that men's ambition can be as dangerous as any dark prophecy. Always remain watchful, Your Grace." "I will," Daenerys affirmed. "But for tonight, at least, let us be grateful." She left Regal then, retiring to her chambers. The next day promised its own set of demands, but for now, she took comfort in what she had. A realm slowly growing strong, and an absence of looming horrors. It was a precious lull. Morning came with subdued sunshine, and Daenerys greeted it with her usual diligence. Another council session took place, during which Tyrion reported new developments. The envoy from Lys had arrived, prepared to discuss the crown's conditions. Daenerys set an official meeting for that afternoon. She also learned that Daario had taken a small patrol of cavalry to clear out rumored bandits near the Rose Road. A routine matter, but essential for keeping trade arteries secure. So it went day after day, incremental steps toward prosperity or at least stability. After her midday meal, she walked to the throne room, where the Lyseni envoy waited. He was a tall, silver-haired man dressed in flowing silks. Several attendants flanked him, all with the olive skin and refined features typical of Lys. Daenerys approached the dais with measured poise, noticing that the Lyseni cast furtive glances at the Iron Throne. Missandei stood by her side as translator if needed, though the envoy's common tongue was decent. "Your Grace," the envoy said in an accented voice, bowing low, "I am Gaharin of Lys. We have heard tales of your great mercy and power, and we come seeking a fruitful arrangement of commerce." Daenerys gestured for him to straighten. "Welcome to King's Landing, Gaharin. We are open to increased trade, provided certain conditions are met. We do not permit slavery in Westeros. That includes enslaved crews, enslaved cargo handlers, or any goods produced by forced labor. You must also adhere to fair customs fees. Are these terms acceptable? Gaharin's expression tightened ever so slightly, but he concealed it behind a diplomatic smile. Of course, Your Grace. We are aware of your realm's stance on slavery. We shall bring only free sailors and laborers. As for customs fees, we are prepared to negotiate to find a balance profitable to both sides. Daenerys glanced at Tyrion, who stood off to the left. He stepped forward with the relevant documents. We propose a tariff rate on Lyseni goods similar to what we extend to Pentos, but with a slight increase to reflect shipping distances. In return, we'll open our ports to your vessels, offering standard docking rights and marketplace stalls. You'll be subjected to inspections to ensure no contraband, namely, no slaves or narcotics. Gaharin's mouth twitched. That is quite thorough, my lord. We've had enough of hidden cargo in these waters, Daenerys said calmly. If you truly come in friendship, you have nothing to hide. The envoy exhaled and nodded. Then we accept the inspection protocol. We do request that the inspectors treat our ships and sailors with respect. No unwarranted seizures, no undue delays that could spoil perishable goods. That is reasonable, Daenerys replied. We'll see to it that the inspectors are fair and swift, with clear guidelines. Gaharin and Tyrion proceeded to finalize the details. Daenerys sat on the throne, listening intently, occasionally interjecting to clarify a point. Over the course of an hour, they forged a preliminary agreement. By the end, Gaharin appeared satisfied, if not thrilled. The man bowed again, praising Daenerys' fairness and repeating that Lys looked forward to a profitable friendship. When the Lyseni delegation departed, Tyrion turned to Daenerys. That went about as smoothly as could be expected. They'll test our resolve, but if we enforce our rules strictly, they'll have to adapt. Daenerys nodded. Agreed. I want no illusions that will turn a blind eye to slavery. Better to establish that from the start. Not long after, Daario returned with his patrol, confirming that the rumored bandits near the Rose Road had dispersed. He swaggered into the throne room, dusty from travel, but wore a casual grin. Your Grace, a handful of outlaws tried to shake down merchants passing by. We chased them off, seized their makeshift hideout, a dilapidated farmhouse, and turned them over to the local magistrate. All's quiet now. She gave him a small, approving smile. Good work. Any casualties? None on our side, he replied. The outlaws had a couple of injuries. They'll face trial for robbery, but at least no one else was harmed. Daenerys inclined her head. You've done well, Daario. Thank you. He dipped a quick bow, then glanced around at the staid assembly of courtiers. I suppose I'll seek a wash and a meal. Don't let this place get too dull without me. She dismissed him with a short laugh. Sometimes she envied the relative freedom Daario enjoyed, riding off whenever trouble called. Her tasks often required her presence in King's Landing, a stationary queen with 1,000 burdens of state. But such was the path she had chosen. That night, the castle hosted a modest feast for the Lyseni visitors, an opportunity to seal goodwill. Daenerys attended in a formal gown of deep blue, with a discreet gold sash. Tyrion orchestrated the meal, ensuring there was no excessive extravagance but enough variety to demonstrate Westeros's resources. The Lyseni marveled at the fresh produce from the Reach, the honeyed wine from the Arbor, and the succulent fish from the Blackwater. All the while, Daenerys remained polite, if a bit reserved. She could sense the Lyseni were feeling out the realm's prosperity, gauging how much profit they might glean. Partway through the feast, she noticed Melisandre lingering at the edge of the hall, speaking with a few curious courtiers who had approached her about the temple's charitable work. Occasionally, the Red Priestess cast a glance in Daenerys' direction as though silently checking on her. Daenerys allowed herself a small smile before turning to answer a Lyseni merchant's query about the cost of stall fees in the city's market squares. After the feast concluded, Daenerys retired, hoping for a restful night. She found her bed, sank into the pillows, and let exhaustion carry her under. The next morning promised a new spate of business with the envoy from Tyrosh, who was due to arrive soon, and so on and so forth. Piece by piece, the realm inched toward a stable prosperity, though never without effort. The next day, as she took breakfast in a bright solar with Melisandre, a guard announced that Lord Royce of the Vale had arrived unexpectedly, seeking urgent counsel. Daenerys exchanged a concerned look with Melisandre. The Vale had been calm since the mountain clans accepted their arrangement. What could have driven Lord Royce to make a personal journey? She swiftly assembled her smaller council, Tyrion, Ser Barristan, Melisandre, and Melisandre, who happened to be on hand, and invited Lord Royce into a side chamber that offered privacy. The tall, broad-shouldered Vale Lord entered, his face lined with fatigue from travel. He bowed stiffly. "Your Grace," he said, voice gruff. "I come with a troubling discovery. A group of men in the Vale, hidden in a remote fortress near the Mountains of the Moon, have been practicing vile rituals. My men were patrolling when they stumbled upon them. Strange symbols, sacrifices of animals. It reminded me of stories from the darkest times of the Long Night." A chill lanced through Daenerys. She thought at once of the rumored Great Other cult near Duskendale. Could this be connected? "Please, tell me more, Lord Royce." He exhaled, running a hand over his thick beard. "My scouts said the men wore dark robes, chanting in a language unknown to them. They glimpsed a large carved idol, something monstrous. Before they could get closer, they were spotted and had to withdraw. A few arrows were loosed at them. One man was wounded." Tyrion frowned. "You're certain this wasn't just a misguided band of superstitious villagers or petty criminals?" Lord Royce shook his head. "The fortress is an old ruin from centuries past, Ghostwatch Keep, it's called. Abandoned for a long time. But it seems these robed figures have made it their lair. They're more than superstitious peasants. My scouts described an organized group, possibly armed. We suspect they've been kidnapping travelers." Daenerys felt the hairs on her arms prickle. "Kidnappings? Have people vanished in that region?" "Yes. Shepherds, peddlers. At first, we assumed it was the mountain clans, but they swore they had no part in it. Now, I believe them." A hush settled in the chamber. Daenerys glanced at Melisandre, who looked grave, her red hair framing intense eyes. The priestess spoke in a measured tone. "Shadows of the Great Other can manifest in many guises. I do not presume that is what we face here, but the worship of such a power can lead to atrocities." Daenerys nodded. "Indeed. We've heard whispers of a cult near Duskendale as well, nothing so violent, but unsettling. Could they be connected?" Tyrion pursed his lips. "Two separate sightings of dark worship in different regions. That's concerning." Lord Royce's brow furrowed. "Your Grace, I came to request your backing in removing these cultists. My knights can handle a straightforward fight, but if these people wield dark magic, or if they've allied with other like-minded groups, we may need more specialized help." Daenerys considered carefully. Sending a large force to the Vale might be seen as an overreach. But ignoring the problem was not an option. "You shall have the crown's support," she said at last. "A detachment of skilled soldiers, perhaps some unsullied or loyal men who won't be intimidated. And we can send someone who knows of such lore. Melisandre, would you consider going? Your insight may prove valuable." Melisandre inclined her head. "I will do as you ask, Your Grace. If these cultists truly invoke powers of darkness, I may be able to sense their nature." Lord Royce looked somewhat wary at the mention of a red priestess, but he gave a curt nod. "If you believe she can help, so be it. I only want this blight removed from my lands." Daenerys turned to Tyrion. "We'll send a modest force, no more than 50 men. I don't want to provoke fear among the Vale's inhabitants. Ricardo can lead the Unsullied unit. Melisandre will accompany them, with your leave, Lord Royce." Royce pressed a fist to his chest. "Yes, I accept. Thank you." With the plan established, they parted ways. Royce would remain in King's Landing for a day to rest, then depart with Ricardo, Melisandre, and the chosen soldiers. Meanwhile, Daenerys wrote to the local lords near Duskendale requesting updates on that rumored cult. If these incidents were connected, she needed to know. Over the next 2 days, final preparations were made. The soldiers were briefed, weapons inspected, and provisions loaded onto pack horses. Melisandre gathered a small trunk of supplies from her temple, candles, certain arcane texts, and a modest set of traveling robes more suited to the Vale's cold nights. Ricardo, stoic yet courteous in his own Dothraki way, greeted Melisandre with mutual respect, though he clearly found her mystical aura puzzling. Before they departed, Daenerys met them in the Red Keep's courtyard. Royce's retinue was already mounted, their banners bearing the crescent moons of the Vale. The Unsullied stood in perfect ranks, gray uniforms stark against the city's dusty hues. Melisandre wore simpler red robes than usual, her flame-colored hair braided back. She approached Daenerys, bowing once. "Your Grace, I shall see this through." If the darkness there is truly dangerous, I will do all I can to quell it. Daenerys rested a hand on the priestess's arm. Be careful. We know too well what darkness can do. But I trust you. Keep me informed. Melisandre nodded, stepping away to mount a sturdy chestnut mare. Ricardo swung up onto his own horse, giving Daenerys a brief salute. With that, the column departed, winding out of the city gates and onto the roads that led north. Daenerys watched them go with a swirl of unease in her chest. She had hoped their greatest evils had been banished with the White Walkers, but men's hearts could still harbor cruelty. Days passed without immediate news. Daenerys continued her duties, meeting the Tyroshi envoys, signing a minor trade treaty with Bravos, opening a new marketplace in the city's southern ward, but her thoughts drifted often to the Vale. She found herself pacing the throne room late in the evening, imagining what Melisandre and Ricardo might be facing. Occasionally, Missandei or Tyrion offered reassurance the Vale was well guarded and Lord Royce was a seasoned commander. But Daenerys could not shake her worry. At last, a raven arrived from Duskendale with an update. The local magistrate had tracked the rumored cult to a small group of itinerant zealots preaching about a coming darkness. So far, they had not harmed anyone physically, though they threatened that the night is not truly ended and tried to recruit desperate folk. The magistrate planned to drive them off if they caused any disturbance. Daenerys sent instructions to remain vigilant, suspecting a connection. She asked the magistrate to share any sign of collaboration with outsiders. The days wore on. Eventually, a raven from the Vale arrived. Ricardo penned the short note in halting common tongue, explaining that they had reached Ghostwatch Keep. The cultists had fired arrows from the battlements, wounding 2 Vale knights. Melisandre sensed a foul presence around the fortress. They intended to lay siege if the cultists refused to surrender. Daenerys read the letter aloud to her council, tension mounting. Tyrion stroked his chin. A fortress, albeit a ruin, could still be formidable. Those robed men might hold out if they have provisions. But I doubt they have the resources to withstand a sustained siege, especially if the Vale invests in it. The question is, what exactly are they worshipping, and does that pose a threat we can't resolve by mere steel? Daenerys gazed at the flickering torches. We must trust Melisandre and Ricardo to handle it. I will not dispatch an entire army. Let's see how the siege progresses. For another week, they heard nothing. Daenerys' mind played through worst-case scenarios: Melisandre besieged by unnatural shadows or Ricardo's men slaughtered by a hidden power. She recalled the horrifying transformations she had seen the White Walkers bring, how ignorance led to vulnerability. At night, she sometimes dreamt of swirling darkness inside old stone walls, chanting voices echoing. She would wake with her heart pounding. Then, late one afternoon, an exhausted messenger from the Vale stumbled into the Red Keep, dust coating his boots. Daenerys immediately summoned him to a private chamber with Tyrion, Missandei, and Ser Barristan. The messenger, breathless, clutched a sealed letter. From Lord Royce, your grace, and the Red Priestess. Daenerys snatched the letter, broke the seal. She recognized Melisandre's careful script. Skimming it, she felt a mix of relief and horror. Melisandre wrote that the siege had ended with a final assault. The cultists refused surrender, chanting maddening verses about the Great Other Reborn. They had indeed kidnapped travelers, planning to sacrifice them in a twisted ritual. Ricardo led the Unsullied in breaching a side wall, fighting through defenders armed with crude but lethal weapons. Many cultists died in the struggle. Inside the fortress's great hall, Melisandre found evidence of black rites, an altar stained with blood, bones arranged in perverse patterns, and a carved effigy depicting a monstrous figure wreathed in ice. Melisandre sensed a pale shadow of the White Walker's ancient power, though not potent enough to animate the dead. She believed it more a cult's delusional attempt to resurrect that which had already been vanquished. The survivors had either fought to the last or fled. Some might have escaped into the mountains, but the majority lay dead or captured. The letter concluded that the fortress was now in Royce's hands. The captives, freed from cages, were traumatized but alive, and Melisandre would remain a few extra days to oversee the destruction of the foul idol. She ended with the words, "The darkness is a reflection of men's fears. They tried to conjure the Great Other. They failed. Yet we must remain watchful, for even an extinguished shad